The rifle barrel pressed cold against Clara's temple. Victor Hale's breath reeked of whiskey and hatred as his gang circled her burned-out barn. "Apache lover," he spat, but Clara didn't flinch because through the smoke she saw him. Ronan Redhawk, the warrior they blamed for her father's death, the man she'd sworn to hate, the one whose hands had held hers in secret just hours before. Their eyes met across 50 yards of no man's land, and everything froze. What happens when love becomes treason? When choosing your heart means choosing a side in a war that swallows everyone whole? Stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city. I want to see how far this story travels. The stagecoach rattled to a halt in a cloud of alkali dust that coated Clara Whitmore's throat like ground glass. She pressed her handkerchief against her mouth, tasting grit and her own bitter fear. Through the window, Salvation Creek didn't look like Salvation. It looked like the kind of place Hope went to die. Wooden buildings leaned against each other like exhausted soldiers. The main street was a scar of dried mud and horse shit, flanked by a general store with broken windows, a saloon still serving at 10 in the morning, and what might have been a church before someone painted over the cross. 30-odd souls lived here, maybe 40. Every one of them looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. Clara was 24 years old. She'd buried her mother at 16, raised her younger brother until consumption took him at 19, and spent the last 3 years teaching piano to Philadelphia daughters who giggled behind their hands at her secondhand dresses. She wasn't soft, but stepping off that coach into the Arizona Territory in July of 1885 felt like stepping into hell's front parlor. "Miss Whitmore?" The voice belonged to a skeletal man in a stained vest, the land agent, probably. His eyes crawled over her traveling dress, calculating. "Didn't expect you'd actually come." "My father's ranch." Clara's voice came out steadier than she felt. "I'm here to claim it." The agent, Henderson, according to the papers, laughed. Actually laughed, showing tobacco-stained teeth. "Ranch? Lady, there ain't nothing left but scorched earth and bad memories. Thomas Whitmore got himself killed 3 weeks back. Apaches hit the place at dawn, burned it to ash." The words hit like fists, but Clara had learned not to show pain. Her father had written 6 months ago, "Come west. I've made something here. We'll start over." She'd sold everything, the piano, her mother's jewelry, even the books, to buy the ticket. And now, how did he die? Henderson spat tobacco juice into the dust. "Quick, if he was lucky. Ronan Redhawk don't usually leave much to bury. We found pieces in the rubble, enough to call it Christian and plant it." Ronan Redhawk. The name hung in the air like smoke. He's the one who everything, Henderson interrupted. War chief, raider. The cavalry's been hunting him for 2 years, but he's smoke. Hits fast, vanishes faster. Your pa probably never saw it coming. Clara felt something cold settle in her chest. Not grief, that would come later, in private. This was simpler, colder. "I want to see the ranch." "Ain't nothing to see." "Then it won't take long." The ride took 40 minutes through country that looked like bones. Sagebrush and creosote, dirt the color of old blood, heat that made the horizon shimmer like water. Henderson kept up a running commentary about Indian troubles, settler feuds, and why any woman with sense would be on the next stage back to civilization. Clara stopped listening after the first 5 minutes. The ranch appeared like a wound in the landscape. Henderson hadn't lied. There was almost nothing left. The main house was a skeleton of blackened timbers. The barn had collapsed into itself. Even the well looked poisoned, its stones scorched and cracked. But the land. 40 acres following a dry creek bed that still held water deep underground. Her father's last letter had described fruit trees he'd planted, a garden, plans for cattle. Clara could see it, or she could see what it might have been. "You done?" Henderson sounded impatient. Clara walked to what remained of the house's foundation. Her boot crunched on something, glass maybe, or bone. She knelt, brushed away ash, and found it, her father's watch. The silver case was tarnished black, but when she opened it, the mechanism still ticked. The engraving inside was barely readable. "For Thomas, with love. Margaret." Her mother's handwriting. "I'm staying," Clara said. Henderson blinked. What? I'm staying. This is my land. I'll rebuild. Lady, you got about as much chance of... I didn't ask for your opinion, Mr. Henderson. I asked how to file the claim. The agent stared at her like she'd grown a second head. Then he shrugged. Your funeral. Literally. Probably. Come by the office tomorrow. Bring $50 for the filing fee. He left her there in the ruins as the sun climbed toward noon. Clara spent the first night in the remains of what had been a storage shed. The roof was mostly intact, and she found enough unburned lumber to fashion a door that closed. Sort of. She had a bedroll from the general store, where the proprietor's wife had looked at her with something between pity and disgust, and a lantern that smoked badly. She didn't sleep. Every sound was a threat, coyotes yipping in the distance, wind rattling through dead wood, someone, moving through the brush beyond the property line. Clara sat with her back against the wall, her father's watch in one hand and the Derringer she'd bought in Philadelphia in the other. The pistol was small enough to hide in a pocket, but the shopkeeper who sold it to her had been clear. 2 shots at close range. Make them count. Dawn came slowly, turning the sky from black to purple to a pale, merciless blue. Clara watched it through the gap in the door and thought about her father. Thomas Whitmore had been a dreamer, always chasing the next opportunity, the next big idea. He'd failed at a dozen ventures before disappearing west with promises Clara had stopped believing. But he'd been trying. That letter, those plans. Maybe he'd finally found something real. And someone had burned it to the ground. She forced herself upright, muscles aching from the hard floor and tension. There was a water barrel that had somehow survived, still half full. Clara washed her face and hands, changed into the work dress she'd packed, plain cotton, already too hot, and started taking inventory. The reality was grim. Useful lumber, maybe enough for one small structure. Tools, a shovel with a cracked handle, a rusted saw, nails scattered in the ash. Food, whatever she could afford from town. Money, the $50 for the land claim, and maybe $30 more. After that, nothing. Clara had been poor before. This was different. This was frontier poor, where mistakes meant death and help was a fantasy. She was measuring a foundation post when she heard the horses. 3 riders coming from the east, moving slow. Clara's hand went to the Derringer in her pocket, but she forced herself to stand straight, visible. Running would mark her as prey. The men reined up 20 yards out. They were rough-looking, sun-scorched skin, mismatched gear, the kind of hard eyes that came from living hard lives. The one in front, older and broader than the others, tipped his hat with exaggerated courtesy. "Morning, miss. Heard there was a lady trying to make a go of this place." His smile showed too many teeth. "Name's Victor Hale. These are my associates, Pike and Brennan. We run cattle through this territory. Clara Whitmore. This is my land. Your land." Hale's smile didn't shift. "See, that's interesting. Because this land's been abandoned. Fair game, legally speaking." "It's not abandoned. My father owned it, and now I do." Pike, a wiry man with a scar bisecting his left eyebrow, laughed. "Your daddy's dead, girl. Apache's got him. You want to end up the same way?" Clara felt the Derringer's weight. 2 shots, 3 men. The math didn't work. "I appreciate the concern," she said, keeping her voice level. "But I'm staying." Hale's expression shifted. Just a flicker, but Clara caught it. Calculation. He was measuring her the way she'd seen men measure horses or land, deciding what she was worth. "Staying?" He said it like the word tasted funny. "Lady, you don't understand what you're walking into. This territory's a powder keg. Settlers versus Apaches, cavalry versus everyone. And a woman alone?" He shook his head. "That's just asking for trouble." "Then I'll deal with trouble when it comes." Brave words. Hale leaned forward in his saddle. "But bravery don't stop arrows. Tell you what, I'll give you $100 for the claim. More than fair, considering there's nothing here." "It's not for sale." Pike spat into the dust. "Stupid bitch thinks she's gonna—" "Easy." Hale held up a hand, but his eyes stayed on Clara. "We're just trying to help. But if you're determined to throw your life away, that's your choice. Just know that when things go bad, and they will. Don't come crying to us." He wheeled his horse around, and the other two followed. But Brennan, who hadn't spoken yet, looked back once. His expression was almost apologetic. Clara watched them disappear into the heat shimmer. Then she sat down hard on a burned timber and let herself shake. The next 2 weeks were a study in pain. Clara learned that blisters formed fastest on the space between thumb and forefinger, that splinters infected quickly in the heat, that her soft teacher's hands would crack and bleed before they calloused. She learned to swing a hammer without hitting her thumb more than once a day, to saw lumber in a straight line, to mix mud and straw into something resembling mortar. She built a shelter, 8 feet by 10, walls of salvaged wood and mud, roof of tin she'd traded her mother's locket for. It leaked in 3 places and offered about as much privacy as a sieve, but it was hers. The people of Salvation Creek watched her like she was a curiosity. Some ignored her completely. A few, mostly women, offered tight-lipped advice that boiled down to leave before you get killed. The saloon owner, a jowly man named Pritchard, refused to serve her at all. "Decent women don't drink," he'd said, and Clara had been too tired to explain she was buying cooking oil. Only one person helped without being asked. Mary Chen ran the general store with her husband, though everyone knew she was the real brains of the operation. She was maybe 40, Chinese by birth, and sharp as a tack. The first time Clara came in with a list she couldn't afford, Mary had looked at her for a long moment, then started cutting prices. "You pay when you can," Mary said, "and you come back when you need more." "I can't accept charity." "Not charity, investment." Mary's smile was thin. "Woman making it alone out here? That's worth something, even if nobody else sees it yet." Clara wanted to hug her. Instead, she just nodded and took the supplies. By the end of the second week, Clara had shelter, a small garden plot scratched into the stubborn earth, and the beginning of a chicken coop. She'd also lost 8 pounds she couldn't afford to lose, developed a persistent cough from the dust, and started having dreams where her father stood in the ashes, trying to tell her something she couldn't hear. But she was still standing. She was checking the fence line, such as it was, when she felt it. The prickling awareness of being watched. Clara froze, hand moving slowly toward the derringer. She scanned the scrub beyond her property, looking for movement. There, 100 yards out, at the edge of an arroyo, a man on horseback, motionless as stone. Even from that distance, Clara could see he was Apache. Dark hair to his shoulders, loose cotton shirt, rifle across his saddle. He was watching her with the kind of stillness that spoke of patience measured in hours, not minutes. Her heart hammered. This was it. The moment Henderson had warned about, the danger everyone said was coming. She should run, hide, shoot, maybe, though the distance made that laughable. Instead, Clara stood still and looked back. She couldn't see his face clearly, but she felt the weight of his attention. It wasn't hostile, at least she didn't think so. It was curious, assessing. They stared at each other across the scrubland for what felt like forever. Then the rider touched 2 fingers to his temple, almost a salute, and turned his horse. He vanished into the arroyo like smoke. Clara realized she'd been holding her breath. She sucked in air that tasted like copper and fear. That night, she dreamed of dark eyes and stillness, and woke up shaking. Yes. 3 days later, Victor Hale came back. This time he brought 7 men. They rode up in formation, rifles visible, and Clara knew immediately this wasn't a social call. She stepped out of her shelter, derringer in her pocket and hammer in her hand. Not much of a weapon, but better than nothing. "Miss Whitmore." Hale dismounted with elaborate slowness. "Heard you had a visitor, Apache scout, watching your place." "I saw someone. He didn't cause trouble." "Didn't cause trouble yet." Hale's voice hardened. "You understand what you're doing? Staying out here, you're bait. They'll come back, and next time it won't be just watching." Clara gripped the hammer tighter. "What do you want, Mr. Hale?" "I want you to see sense. Take my offer, $200 now, and go back east where you belong." "No. You're endangering everyone in this territory. The Apaches see you out here alone. They think we're weak, divided. You're making us all targets." "I'm not leaving my land." Hale's jaw tightened. "Your land. You've been here 3 weeks and you think you own something. Let me explain how this works, lady. We, the settlers who've been here for years, who've bled for this ground, We decide who stays and who goes. And you? He stepped closer. You're a liability we can't afford. Pike had moved around to Clara's left, she noticed. Brennan to her right. The others were spreading out, boxing her in. I filed my claim legally, Clara said, fighting to keep her voice steady. This is my property. Property's only yours if you can hold it. Hale's hand rested on his pistol. And I don't think you can. The moment stretched like hot glass, ready to shatter. Then a voice cut through the tension. She won't have to. Everyone turned. A single rider approached from the west, the direction no one had been watching. He rode a paint horse, sat easy in the saddle, and carried a rifle like it was part of his arm. Apache. Clara's breath caught. It was him, the watcher from before. Up close she could see his face, angular features, dark eyes that missed nothing, a scar cutting through his left eyebrow. He looked maybe 30, though it was hard to tell. He looked like concentrated danger. Victor Hale's men shifted, hands moving toward weapons. But Hale himself went very still. Redhawk, he said, and the name came out like a curse. Ronan Redhawk guided his horse forward with minute knee pressure. He stopped between Clara and Hale's gang, close enough that Clara could see the beadwork on his rifle strap. When he spoke, his English was perfect, almost unaccented. You're on our land. Leave. This doesn't concern you, Apache. Everything here concerns me. Ronan's eyes flicked to Clara, then back to Hale. This woman has done nothing. Leave her alone. Pike's hand was definitely on his gun now. Why the hell do you care about... Pike, shut up! Hale's voice cracked like a whip. He stared at Ronan with naked hatred. You killed settlers, burned ranches, and now you're playing protector? I protect what I choose to protect. She's white. She's one of us. Is she? Ronan's gaze was level, almost amused. Because from where I stand, you look like you're about to kill her yourselves. The silence that followed was murderous. Clara could see Hale calculating 7 armed men against 1 Apache. The math favored him, but she could also see the fear underneath. Ronan Redhawk wasn't just a man. He was a legend, a ghost, the kind of enemy you didn't fight unless you had no choice. This isn't over, Hale finally said. He mounted his horse in one smooth motion. You're making a mistake, Redhawk, and you... He jabbed a finger at Clara. You're dead. You just don't know it yet. They rode out in a cloud of dust and rage. Clara stood frozen, hammer still in her hand, trying to process what had just happened. Ronan remained. His horse shifted, blowing softly through its nostrils. You're Clara Whitmore, he said. Not a question. How do you... I knew your father. Ronan's expression was unreadable. Briefly, he was different from the others. Clara's throat was dry. Did you kill him? The question hung between them like a blade. Ronan studied her for a long moment. Then, no, but I know who did. Tell me. Not today. He started to turn his horse. You shouldn't stay here. It's not safe. Everyone keeps saying that. I'm staying anyway. Something that might have been respect crossed Ronan's face. Then you're either very brave or very stupid. Maybe both. He almost smiled. Almost. Then he was gone, riding north toward the mountains with the same eerie silence he'd arrived with. Clara stood in the dust for a long time, trying to understand what had just happened. The Apache they blamed for her father's death had just saved her life. Victor Hale, a white settler, had threatened to kill her. Nothing made sense. But one thing was clear. She'd just stepped into the middle of a war she didn't understand, and both sides had noticed her now. There was no going back. Yum. The next morning, Clara found gifts at her property line. A deer haunch, expertly butchered and wrapped in cloth. A coil of rope, new and strong. A small leather pouch containing seeds, corn, beans, squash. There was no note, but Clara knew where they came from. She looked toward the mountains, half expecting to see a distant rider. But there was nothing except heat shimmer and sky. Mary Chen raised her eyebrows when Clara brought the deer meat to trade. Where'd you get this? Does it matter? Mary's expression was knowing. In this territory, everything matters, but I'll trade fair. You need rifle bullets? I don't have a rifle. You do now. Mary produced a Winchester from under the counter, old but serviceable. Left here 3 years ago as collateral. Previous owner never came back. 50 bullets and cleaning kit included. Call it $20. Clara had $17 to her name. Mary saw her hesitation and sighed. 15, and you pay when you can. Mary, a woman alone needs to be able to shoot straight. Consider it an investment in the neighborhood, not getting more interesting than it already is. Clara took the rifle. It was heavier than she expected, solid and real, in a way that made her previous life, teaching piano to Philadelphia debutantes, feel like something from a dream. That night, she practiced loading and unloading the Winchester until her fingers knew the motions by memory. She didn't know if she could actually shoot someone, but she wanted to be able to make that choice when the moment came. She was cleaning the rifle when she heard it. Hoofbeats, multiple horses, coming fast. Clara grabbed the Winchester and the Derringer, stepped outside. The moon was nearly full, turning the landscape silver in shadow. She could see them coming, maybe a dozen riders, torches raised, moving toward her land like a wave. Her heart slammed against her ribs. This was it. Hale had come back with reinforcements to burn her out. Or worse. She levered around into the Winchester's chamber, braced herself against the shelter's wall, and waited. The riders got within 100 yards. Clara could see faces now. Pike was there, and Brennan, and others she recognized from town. But Victor Hale led them, sitting his horse like a king surveying a battlefield. "Clara Whitmore," his voice carried across the night. "Last chance, take the money and leave." Clara stepped into the moonlight, rifle raised. "Get off my land." "Your land?" Hale laughed, and the sound was ugly. "Lady, you're squatting on borrowed time. We've been patient. We've tried to help, but you keep spitting in our faces, so here's what's going to happen." He never finished the sentence. They came from the darkness like flowing water. No war cries, no warnings. Just sudden movement and the whisper of arrows and 20 Apache warriors materializing from shadows that shouldn't have hidden anything. Hale's horses screamed and reared. Pike got an arrow through his shoulder and fell cursing from his saddle. Brennan fired wildly at nothing, and someone, Clara couldn't see who, knocked the gun from his hand with a thrown stone. In 10 seconds, it was over. Hale's gang was disarmed, unhorsed, surrounded by warriors who could have killed them all and chose not to. And Ronan Redhawk walked his horse calmly into the center of the chaos. He looked at Hale. Just looked, with an expression of such profound contempt that the settler actually flinched. "Leave," Ronan said. "Now. If I see you on this land again, I won't be merciful." "You're starting a war," Hale spat, clutching his reins with white knuckles. "No." Ronan glanced at Clara, and she felt the weight of that look all the way to her bones. "I'm preventing one. This woman is under my protection. Harm her, and you answer to me, all of you." He made a small gesture. The warriors melted back into the darkness as silently as they'd come. Within seconds, only Ronan remained. Hale gathered his men, the ones who could still ride, and fled into the night. The wounded Pike had to be carried, leaving a trail of blood and curses. Clara stood with the Winchester still raised, shaking so hard she thought her knees would give out. Ronan rode closer, stopped, dismounted. "You're making powerful enemies," he said quietly. "So are you." Clara lowered the rifle. "Why did you do that?" "Because Hale is a coward and a murderer. Because you have more courage than sense. Because—" He stopped, seemed to reconsider. "Because it needed to be done. I didn't ask for your protection." "I know." Ronan studied her in the moonlight. "You didn't ask for any of this. But you're here anyway. That means something." "What does it mean?" "I don't know yet." He remounted his horse with easy grace. "But I think we're going to find out." Then he was gone, and Clara was alone with the smell of gunpowder and the sound of her own heartbeat thundering in her ears. She went inside, barred the door, and didn't sleep at all. Scum. Word spread fast. By noon the next day, everyone in Salvation Creek knew that Clara Whitmore had Apache protection. The reactions ranged from hostile to horrified. The saloon owner refused to look at her. The few women who'd been cautiously friendly before now crossed the street to avoid her. Even Henderson, the land agent, eyed her like she'd grown fangs. Only Mary Chen treated her the same. When Clara came in for supplies, Mary handed her a box of rifle cartridges without comment. "How bad is it?" Clara asked quietly. Mary considered. "You're alive. That counts for something, but you need to understand what you've done. In their eyes, you've chosen a side." "I didn't choose anything. I just wanted to rebuild my father's ranch. Intentions don't matter here, only actions. And when Apache warriors defend a white woman's land?" Mary shook her head. "That's a story people will tell for years. Question is whether you live long enough to hear it." Clara took the cartridges. "What would you do?" "Me?" Mary smiled grimly. "I'd learn to shoot straight and sleep light. And I'd figure out what the hell Ronan Redhawk actually wants. Because men like that don't risk war for nothing." It was a fair question. Clara had been asking herself the same thing. She got her answer 3 days later. She was working on the chicken coop the hens she'd traded for needed somewhere to sleep when Ronan appeared. No horse this time. He walked out of the arroyo like he'd been born from the earth itself. Clara straightened, hand instinctively moving toward the Winchester propped against the fence. "Don't," Ronan said. "I'm not here to fight." "Why are you here?" "To talk, if you'll allow it." Clara hesitated. Every instinct screamed danger, but her instincts had been wrong before. They'd told her to go back to Philadelphia, to give up, to run, and here she was. "All right," she said. "Talk." Ronan moved closer, his movements economical and precise. Up close, Clara could see details she'd missed before. The calluses on his hands, the scar that ran from his collarbone down beneath his shirt, the way his eyes constantly scanned the horizon even while focused on her. He was maybe an inch taller than her. She was tall for a woman, 5'8" in boots, and most men towered over her. But Ronan's presence had nothing to do with size. It was the way he inhabited space, like he owned every inch of ground he stood on. "Your father," he began, "Thomas Whitmore. I met him twice. Once at a trading post, once at a water source we both needed. He was—" Ronan searched for words. "Different. He didn't see enemies everywhere, just people." Clara's throat tightened. That sounded like her father. Thomas Whitmore, the dreamer, the optimist, the man who believed people were basically good if you gave them half a chance. "How did he die?" "Raiders. Not Apache. White men dressed as Apache. They've been terrorizing the territory for months, burning homesteads, killing settlers, leaving evidence that points to us. Your father's ranch was one of many. Why would whites—" "To start a war," Ronan's voice was flat. "Push the settlers and the army into attacking us. Drive us off the land completely. Victor Hale and his men profit from the conflict. They buy up abandoned homesteads, sell them to newcomers who don't know the land's cursed with blood." Clara felt cold despite the heat. "You're saying Hale killed my father?" "Him or his men, I can't prove it, but I know the pattern." Ronan met her eyes. "I'm sorry. Your father was a good man. He didn't deserve what happened. And you're telling me this because you're not leaving. You're staying on land that Hale wants, which makes you a target." Ronan paused. "And because I'm trying to prevent more bloodshed. If we can expose Hale, show the truth, maybe there's a path forward that doesn't end with everyone dead." Clara laughed, a short, bitter sound. "You think the settlers will believe you? An Apache warrior accusing a white man? No. But they might believe you." Understanding hit like cold water. "You want me to help you prove Hale killed my father. I want to offer you a choice. You can ignore this, rebuild your ranch, hope Hale loses interest. Or you can help me find evidence that saves both our peoples from a war neither side will win." It was insane. Suicidal. Clara should say no, send him away, focus on survival. But she thought about her father's watch, still ticking in her pocket, about the letter promising a new start, about the deer meat and seeds left at her property line. "What do you need from me?" she heard herself ask. Ronan's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes shifted. Respect, maybe, or recognition. "Information. Hale and his men come through town. They talk. You can hear things I can't. And if we find proof, burned clothing, stolen Apache weapons, anything, You can present it to the army in a way they'll listen to. And if we're caught, then we both die. Probably badly. Clara looked at her half-built chicken coop, her leaking shelter, the 40 acres of stubborn earth she'd claimed as hers. She thought about Philadelphia, about the life she'd left, about all the safe choices she could have made. "All right," she said, "I'll help you." Ronan extended his hand. Clara stared at it for a heartbeat. Crossing this line meant treason, collaboration, choosing a side in a conflict she barely understood. She shook his hand. His grip was warm and calloused and surprisingly gentle. "Thank you," Ronan said. "Don't thank me yet. I might get us both killed." He almost smiled. "Then we'll be in good company." He left as quietly as he'd arrived. Clara stood in the dust, watching the horizon, and wondered what she'd just agreed to. The sun climbed toward noon, brutal and indifferent. Somewhere in the distance, a hawk cried. And Clara Whitmore, piano teacher turned homesteader turned spy, went back to building her chicken coop. She had work to do. And now she had a purpose beyond simple survival. The war was coming whether she liked it or not. But maybe, just maybe, she could help make sure the right people paid for their crimes, even if it killed her. The first week of their arrangement, Clara saw Ronan exactly twice. Both times he came at dusk, moving through the scrub like he was part of it, and both times he stayed less than 10 minutes. Their conversations were clipped, practical. He asked what she'd heard in town. She told him what little gossip the hostile settlers would share near her. He nodded, gave her small things, a better knife, dried meat, once a blanket that didn't smell like mildew, and disappeared before full dark. It felt like feeding a half-wild animal. Careful, cautious. Neither of them quite trusting what they'd started. But on the 8th day, things shifted. Clara was in town buying nails when she heard Victor Hale's voice booming from inside Pritchard's saloon. She wasn't supposed to go near the place. Decent women didn't, and Clara's reputation was already shredded. But she edged closer to the open window anyway, pretending to examine the dry goods in the store next door. 3 more homesteads hit last week, Hale was saying. Apache tactics, Apache arrows. You all saw the Henderson place. Burned to nothing, just like Whitmore's ranch. Clara's hand stilled on a bag of flour. "Cavalry ain't doing shit," another voice complained. "They ride around, make noise, catch nobody. Meanwhile, we're sitting ducks." "That's because they're fighting the wrong enemy." Hale's voice dropped, became confidential. "I've been talking to some people. People who understand what needs to happen here. We can't wait for the army to protect us. We need to take matters into our own hands." "You talking about a militia?" That was Pike, his shoulder probably still aching from the arrow he'd taken. "I'm talking about survival. We hit them before they hit us. Show them we're not soft, not anymore." Murmurs of agreement. Clara risked a glance through the window. Hale stood at the bar surrounded by maybe 15 men. Some she recognized from town. Others looked like drifters, guns for hire. All of them looked angry and scared in equal measure. "When?" someone asked. "Soon. I've got scouts tracking their movements. There's a camp about 20 miles north, up in the canyon country. Maybe 30 warriors, some women and children. We hit them hard, fast, make an example." Clara's stomach turned over. She stepped back from the window too quickly, knocked into a barrel. The sound wasn't loud, but Hale stopped mid-sentence. "Someone outside?" Clara walked away fast, but not running. Running would draw attention. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she made it to Mary Chen's store, pushed through the door. Mary took one look at her face. "What happened?" "Hale. He's planning something, an attack on an Apache camp." Mary's expression went carefully blank. "You sure?" "I heard him. Mary, there are children." "Lower your voice." Mary glanced at the empty store, then pulled Clara toward the back. "You can't repeat this. Not to anyone white, you understand?" "But, Clara, listen to me. Half this town would cheer if Hale wiped out every Apache from here to Mexico. The other half wouldn't cheer, but they wouldn't stop him either. If you warn them, if anyone finds out you're helping—" Mary didn't finish. She didn't need to. Clara's hands were shaking. "What do I do?" "What you've already been doing. Tell Ronan, let him handle his people, and pray nobody saw you listening." That night, Clara didn't wait for Ronan to come to her. She took the Winchester and walked north into the scrubland, toward the arroyo where she'd first seen him. It was stupid and dangerous and probably suicidal, but the image of children burning kept playing behind her eyes. She made it maybe 2 miles before he appeared. "You're loud," Ronan said from somewhere to her left. "I heard you from half a mile away." Clara spun, rifle half raised. He stood in the shadow of a creosote bush, barely visible even though she was looking right at him. "Hale," she said. "He's planning an attack, a camp 20 miles north. He has scouts, he has men. He's moving soon." Ronan went absolutely still. "How soon?" "I don't know. Days, maybe?" He didn't say exactly. "What else?" Clara repeated everything she'd heard. Ronan listened without interrupting, his face unreadable in the starlight. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "That camp," he finally said. "My sister lives there. Her children." Something in his voice, not fear exactly, but the edge of it, made Clara's chest tight. "Can you move them?" "Maybe, if we have time." Ronan looked at her, and for the first time since they'd met, his expression was completely open. "Thank you. You didn't have to warn us." "Yes, I did." "No, you could have stayed quiet, stayed safe. Most people would have." Clara thought about her father, about his belief that people were basically decent if you gave them the chance. "I'm not most people." "No," Ronan said softly. "You're not." They stood in the darkness, and something passed between them that Clara couldn't name. Not quite trust, not quite friendship, but something real. "I need to go," Ronan said. "Get everyone moved before Hale's scouts spot them. Be careful." He looked at her strangely. "You're worried about me." "I'm worried about your sister's children. Don't make it more than it is." But they both knew she was lying. Ronan melted into the darkness, and Clara walked back to her ranch with the distinct feeling that she'd just crossed another line, one she couldn't uncross. The next 3 days were tense. Clara went about her work, garden, chickens, endless repairs. But her attention was always half elsewhere, listening for gunshots or screams, or the sound of approaching riders. The town felt electric with anticipation. Men gathered in tight groups, speaking in low voices. Hale moved through Salvation Creek like a general inspecting troops. On the 4th day, the militia rode out. Clara watched from the general store as maybe 20 men assembled in the street. Hale sat his horse like a conqueror, Pike beside him with his arm still in a sling, Brennan looking uncomfortable but determined. They had rifles, pistols, enough ammunition to fight a small war. Some of them were drunk already. "Where they headed?" Clara asked Mary, keeping her voice casual. "Hunting Apaches, they say." Mary's face was stone. "Like it's sport." They rode north in a cloud of dust and bravado. Clara waited until they were out of sight, then slipped away to the edge of town. She didn't know if Ronan would come, didn't know if he'd even received her warning in time. But she waited anyway. He appeared an hour before sunset, moving along the arroyo like a shadow. When he saw her, something in his posture relaxed. "They're safe," he said. "We moved the camp 2 days ago. Hale's men will find nothing but cold fires." Relief flooded through Clara so strongly, her knees went weak. "Good. That's good. You saved lives. My nephew is 4 years old. My niece is 6. Because of you, they're still breathing." Clara didn't know what to say to that. She settled for, "What happens when Hale comes back empty-handed?" "He'll be angry, humiliated, dangerous." Ronan studied her. "You should leave for a while. Go to the next town. Wait until things cool down." "No." "Clara, I'm not running. Not again." She met his eyes. "Besides, if I disappear right after his raid fails, it'll look suspicious. Better to stay, act normal." Ronan's jaw tightened. "You're taking too many risks." "So are you." They stared at each other. The sun was setting, turning the sky orange and purple, and Clara realized with a start that she was standing close enough to Ronan to see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, close enough to feel the heat coming off his skin. She stepped back. "You should go, before someone sees." "Yes," but he didn't move. "Clara, what you did, warning us, the people in that camp, they'll want to thank you. They don't need to come with me. Tonight. Meet them. Let them put faces to the woman who saved their children." Every rational part of Clara's mind screamed no. Going to an Apache camp was suicide. If anyone found out, she'd be lynched. It was insane. All right, she said. Ronan blinked. You'll come? Unless you're uninviting me. Something that might have been a smile crossed his face. No, I'm not. He glanced at the darkening sky. An hour after full dark. I'll come for you. He left her standing in the scrub, and Clara walked back to her ranch wondering what the hell she'd just agreed to. She spent the next hours in a state of nervous energy, changing clothes 3 times before settling on her work dress and sturdy boots. She loaded the Winchester, then unloaded it, then loaded it again. What did you bring to meet people whose children you'd saved? Gifts? Nothing? She settled on a small bag of the good coffee Mary had traded her, wrapped in cloth. Ronan appeared exactly when he'd promised, leading a second horse, a sturdy roan mare. You ride? He asked. Badly. Claire had learned as a child, but it had been years. The horse knows the way. Just stay on. The ride took over an hour, north and west into country Clara had never seen. The land grew rougher, all arroyos and hidden canyons, the kind of terrain you could vanish into and never be found. She tried to memorize landmarks, failed, and eventually just focused on not falling off the horse. They descended into a canyon, and suddenly there were fires, shelters made of brush and canvas, people. Clara's heart hammered as faces turned toward them. Women, children, old men, a few warriors. They were watching her with expressions ranging from curious to hostile, and Clara felt nakedly exposed in a way that had nothing to do with the firelight. Ronan dismounted and came to help her down. His hands on her waist were steadying, solid. It's all right, he said quietly. You're safe here. A woman approached, maybe 40, with silver threading through her dark hair and eyes that could have been Ronan's sister even before he said, Clara, this is Nalin, my sister. Nalin looked Clara up and down with an expression Clara couldn't read. Then she said something in Apache, rapid and musical. Ronan answered, equally quick. Nalin's eyebrows rose. She says, Ronan translated, that you're taller than she expected, and thinner. She wants to feed you. I brought coffee, Clara said stupidly, holding out the bag. Nalin took it, examined the contents, and laughed. She said something else. She says coffee is good, but you still look half-starved. Come. What followed was surreal. Clara sat by a fire, surrounded by people who should have been her enemies, eating stew that tasted better than anything she'd had in months. Children stared at her with wide eyes. An old man asked her questions through Ronan's translation. Where she came from, why she'd stayed, what she thought of the territory. Clara answered as honestly as she could, and tried not to think about the fact that Victor Hale and his men had been planning to kill everyone here. A little girl, she couldn't have been more than 5, approached shyly and handed Clara a small woven bracelet. Nalin said something that made Ronan smile. She says it's a gift, for protection. Clara's throat went tight. Tell her thank you. It's beautiful. She slipped the bracelet on her wrist. It fit perfectly. Later, after the meal, Ronan walked her away from the fires toward where the horses were tethered. The night was cool, stars so thick they looked like scattered salt. They like you, Ronan said. They're being polite. No, Nalin doesn't do polite. She likes you. She said you have courage. Clara laughed shakily. I don't feel courageous. I feel terrified most of the time. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's acting despite it. Ronan paused. You came here tonight. That took trust. So did bringing me here. They stood in the darkness, and Clara was acutely aware of how close Ronan was standing. Close enough that she could see the line of his jaw, the way his hair fell across his forehead. Close enough to realize that somewhere in the last weeks she'd stopped seeing him as a stranger and started seeing him as, what? An ally? A friend? Something more dangerous than either. I should get you back, Ronan said, his voice rougher than before you're missed. The ride home was quieter. Clara's mind was full of firelight and children's laughter and the weight of Nalin's gift on her wrist. When they reached the edge of her property, Ronan helped her dismount. Thank you, Clara said, for trusting me with that. Thank you for being worthy of trust. Ronan hesitated, then added, Be careful. Hale will be back soon. He won't be rational. When is he ever rational? This will be worse. A failed raid means lost face, lost money. He'll lash out and you're the most visible target. Clara touched the Winchester strapped to her saddle. Let him try. Ronan's expression was pained. Clara, I know. I'll be careful. She met his eyes. You too. He rode off into the darkness, and Clara stood watching until even the sound of hoofbeats faded. She didn't sleep that night either, but this time it wasn't from fear. Hale's militia returned the next afternoon, and Clara heard about it before she saw it. The sound of angry voices from town carried across the scrubland. She walked into Salvation Creek to find a crowd gathered outside the saloon, Hale standing on the porch like a preacher about to deliver damnation. Gone, he was saying. The whole camp vanished like smoke. Someone warned them. Someone in this town is collaborating with the enemy. The crowd murmured. Angry, frightened sounds. Who? Someone shouted. I don't know yet, but I will find out. Hale's eyes swept the crowd, and when they landed on Clara, they stopped. And when I do, there will be a reckoning. Clara forced herself to meet his stare. Running would be an admission of guilt. So she stood there, chin up, while Hale's gaze crawled over her like something cold and invasive. Pike, standing beside Hale, whispered something. Hale nodded slowly. Miss Whitmore, Hale called out. Interesting that you're here. Don't usually see you in town this time of day. I'm buying supplies, Clara said, keeping her voice level. Is that a crime? Depends on what you're supplying and to who. The crowd shifted, and Clara felt the current turn. She was isolated suddenly, surrounded by hostile faces. Her hand wanted to move toward the derringer in her pocket, but that would only make things worse. I don't know what you're implying, Mr. Hale. Don't you? Hale stepped down from the porch, moving toward her with deliberate slowness. You show up out of nowhere. You refuse to leave even when it's clearly dangerous. Apache warriors defend your land. And now, right before my men go to teach them a lesson, the enemy disappears. Quite a coincidence. I had nothing to do with your failure, Clara said. Wrong thing to say. Hale's face went purple. My failure? You little... That's enough. Mary Chen's voice cut through the tension. She stood in the doorway of her store, shotgun cradled in her arms, not pointing at anyone. Not yet. Clara's a customer. You want to make accusations? You take them to the marshal. What marshal? Hale spat. Nearest law is 3 days' ride. Out here, we make our own justice. Then make it legal. Mary's voice was iron. Otherwise, you're just a mob. The crowd hesitated. Mary was respected. She'd been in the territory longer than anyone except Pritchard, and she'd helped most of them at one time or another. Her opinion carried weight. Hale looked between Mary and Clara, calculating. Then he smiled, cold and sharp. You're right, Mrs. Chen. We should do this proper. He turned to the crowd. I'm calling for a town meeting, tonight. We'll discuss the Apache problem and how to handle collaborators. Everyone's required to attend. It wasn't a request. The crowd murmured agreement and began to disperse. Hale gave Clara one last look, a promise of violence deferred, not canceled, and walked back into the saloon. Clara's legs were shaking. Mary jerked her head toward the store, and Clara followed. Inside, with the door closed, Mary set down the shotgun. You need to run, now, tonight. If I run, if you stay, they'll kill you. That wasn't a town meeting Hale called. It was a trial, and you're already convicted. Clara sank onto a stool, her mind racing. What about you? He'll know you helped me. I can handle Hale. I've got friends, money, leverage. You've got a half-built chicken coop and enemies on all sides. Mary pulled out a bag, started filling it with supplies. Take this. Ride east. Don't stop until you hit El Paso. Start over somewhere they don't know your name. It was good advice. Sensible. Clara should take it. But she thought about Ronan's sister, about the children who'd given her a bracelet, about her father's watch still ticking in her pocket, about the principle of the thing, that men like Hale shouldn't get to decide who belonged and who didn't through violence and fear. No, Clara said. Mary's hands stilled. What? I'm not running. I'll go to the meeting. I'll face them. That's suicide. Maybe. But if I run, Hale wins. He gets my land, he gets to spread more fear, and nothing changes. Clara stood. I can't live with that. Mary stared at her for a long moment, then she sighed. You're either the bravest woman I've ever met or the stupidest. Possibly both. Probably both. Fine. Then at least take the shotgun, and don't go to that meeting alone. Who exactly would? Me! Mary hefted the weapon. If they're going to have a lynch mob, they can do it in front of witnesses who'll remember. Clara wanted to hug her. Instead, she just nodded. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. We might both be dead by morning. The town meeting was held in the largest building in Salvation Creek, an abandoned warehouse that usually stored grain. By the time Clara and Mary arrived, maybe 40 people had gathered. Settlers, ranchers, prospectors, even a few women. The air smelled like sweat and anger. Hale stood at the front, Pike and Brennan flanking him like guards. When Clara entered, conversation stopped. Every eye turned toward her. Good of you to come, Miss Whitmore, Hale said. Saves us the trouble of fetching you. Clara walked to the front, Mary at her side. She could feel the hostility like heat. You called a meeting, Clara said. I'm here. Say what you have to say. Hale smiled. All right, I'll be direct. I believe you're collaborating with the Apaches. I believe you warned them about our raid. And I believe that makes you a traitor to your own people. That's a serious accusation, Mary said. You have proof? The proof is the failed raid. Someone talked. Who else but the woman they've been protecting? That's not proof, Clara said. That's speculation. Is it? Hale pulled something from his pocket, a scrap of cloth. We found this at the abandoned camp. Recognize it? He held it up. Clara's stomach sank. It was a piece of her shawl, torn and dirty. She'd lost it weeks ago, hadn't even noticed. Could belong to anyone, Mary said, but her voice was uncertain. Could. But it doesn't. Hale's smile widened. I also have witnesses who saw you lurking outside the saloon the day before the raid, listening. And I have reports of you riding north into Apache territory. At night. Alone. The crowd murmured, angry, frightened sounds. Clara's mind raced. Half of it was true. She had listened. She had ridden north. But the shawl was planted, had to be. Hale was manufacturing evidence to fill the gaps. I haven't done anything wrong, Clara said, knowing how weak it sounded. Then explain the shawl. Explain the rides. Explain why Apaches defend your land but burn everyone else's. Hale turned to the crowd. She's playing both sides, using us for protection while helping them plan attacks. How many of you have lost family to Apache raids? How many have seen your homes burned? Hands raised. Too many hands. And here she is, Hale continued, safe and sound on land that should have been attacked a dozen times over. Because she's working with them. Because she's betrayed us. The crowd's anger was building, becoming something physical and dangerous. Clara saw men checking their weapons, saw faces twisted with rage and fear. This is insane, Mary said loudly. You're whipping up a mob because your raid failed, because you're embarrassed. I'm protecting this community, Hale roared, from external threats and internal traitors, and I'm asking everyone here, what do we do with collaborators? Hang them, someone shouted. Run them out, another voice called. Make an example. The words piled up, each one worse than the last. Clara felt the situation spiraling beyond control, beyond reason. This wasn't a meeting. It was exactly what Mary had said, a trial where the verdict was already decided. You want to kill me? Clara heard herself say. Her voice cut through the noise. Fine, but do it for the right reasons. I've done nothing but try to rebuild my father's ranch. I haven't hurt anyone. I haven't burned any homes. All I've done is refuse to be driven away by threats and intimidation. You warned the Apaches, Hale said. Did I? You have no proof except a piece of cloth that could have come from anywhere. You have suspicion and fear and a desperate need for someone to blame because your raid failed. Clara looked at the crowd. I'm not your enemy, but he is. She pointed at Hale. He's the one who profits from conflict. He's the one who buys up burned homesteads and resells them. He's the one who benefits from keeping you all terrified and divided. And I think he's the one who's been burning those homesteads himself. The warehouse went silent. Hale's face went very still. Careful, he said softly. It makes sense, Clara continued, her heart hammering but her voice steady. Dress like Apaches, burn homes, blame them for everything. Start a war that drives people away so you can claim the land. My father figured it out, didn't he? That's why you killed him. You have no proof of that. Neither do you. About me. Clara met his eyes. So let's be honest about what this is. You want my land. You want me gone, and you'll use any excuse to make it happen. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Brennan, standing behind Hale, said quietly, She might be right. Everyone turned. Brennan looked sick but determined. About the raids, I've been thinking about it. The timing's always convenient for us. Always happens right when Victor needs more land or more men angry enough to— Shut your mouth, Hale snarled. No. Brennan stepped forward. I'm done. Whatever this is, I want no part of it. He walked out. Just like that, pushing through the crowd and into the night. The crowd shifted, uncertain now. Doubt was a crack in the dam. Hale saw it happening. Don't listen to her. She's trying to divide us, turn us against each other. That's what traitors do. Then prove I'm a traitor, Clara challenged, with real evidence, not planted cloth and circumstantial. The warehouse door crashed open. Ronan Redhawk stood in the entrance, rifle in hand. The silence that followed was absolute. 40 people frozen like statues, staring at the Apache warrior framed in the doorway. Clara's breath stopped in her throat. This was it. The moment everything exploded into violence and blood. Ronan's eyes swept the room, cataloging threats with the efficiency of a predator. His rifle wasn't aimed at anyone, but it didn't need to be. Everyone knew what he could do with it. You're making a mistake, Ceci, he said, his voice carrying easily in the stillness. Hale recovered first, his hand moving toward his pistol. You've got some nerve walking in here. I'm here to talk, not fight. Ronan took 3 steps inside, slow and deliberate. But if you want violence, I can provide that too. Pike started to raise his rifle. Ronan's weapon came up so fast it was a blur, aimed dead center at Pike's chest. Pike froze. Don't, Ronan said quietly. Mary Chen moved slightly, positioning herself between Clara and the crowd. Her shotgun was ready but not raised. A statement of intent without declaration of war. Talk about what? Hale demanded. You've got nothing to say that we want to hear. I have proof. Ronan reached slowly into his shirt, pulled out a folded piece of cloth. He tossed it toward Hale. It landed at his feet. Pick it up. Hale stared at the cloth like it might be poisonous. Finally, Pike bent and retrieved it, unfolded it. His face went pale. What is it? Someone in the crowd called. Pike's voice was hoarse. It's an army jacket. Cavalry issue. Found it 3 miles from the Henderson place, Ronan said, along with these. He pulled out a handful of arrows, held them up. Settler made. You can tell by the fletching, wrong feathers, wrong binding. Someone's been making fake Apache weapons. The crowd murmured, confused, uncertain sounds. That doesn't prove anything, Hale said, but his voice had lost its confidence. No? Then explain why I found both items in a cache 2 miles from your ranch, hidden in a dry creek bed. Ronan's eyes were cold. Along with a dozen more army uniforms, Apache clothing, and enough supplies to stage raids for months. Clara's heart was hammering. Ronan was doing it, turning the accusation back on Hale with physical evidence. But it was also incredibly dangerous. One wrong move and this room would erupt. He's lying, Hale said. He planted that evidence. Can't trust anything an Apache says. Can't you? Ronan looked at the crowd. I know what you think of my people. I know you blame us for every burned home, every death. And some of that blame is earned. There's been violence on both sides. But these raids, the ones that started 6 months ago, the ones that always happen right before Hale buys up more land? He shook his head. Those aren't us. Then who? A woman called out. She was older, weathered, holding herself like she'd lost someone recently. Him. Ronan pointed at Hale. And his men. They dress as Apache, burn your homes, kill your families. Then Hale swoops in, buys the land cheap, and resells it to the next desperate settler. It's profit. Simple as that. You expect us to believe, Hale started. I expect you to think, Ronan interrupted. Clara Whitmore came here to rebuild her father's ranch. She's done nothing but work that land and mind her business, but suddenly she's your enemy. Because I chose to protect her? Because she refused to be intimidated?" He paused. "Or because Hale wants her land and she won't sell?" The warehouse was so quiet Clara could hear people breathing. The crowd was wavering, she could feel it, doubt spreading like cracks in ice. "I have more evidence," Ronan said, "hidden where your people can verify it. Witnesses who saw Hale's men changing clothes before raids. Records of land purchases that match exactly with the timing of attacks." He looked at Hale. "You've been clever, but not clever enough." Hale's face was stone. Then, so fast Clara almost missed it, his hand went for his gun. Ronan's rifle barked once. The shot took Hale's hat clean off his head, sent it spinning to the floor. Hale froze with his pistol half drawn. "Next one goes through your skull," Ronan said calmly. "Your choice." "Kill him!" Hale screamed at his men. "Kill them both!" But no one moved. Pike's hand was nowhere near his weapon. The other men loyal to Hale looked uncertain, calculating odds they clearly didn't like. And the rest of the crowd, the settlers who'd come looking for justice, were staring at Hale like they were seeing him for the first time. "It's true, isn't it?" the older woman said, her voice shaking. "The Henderson place, that was you. My neighbors died because you wanted their land." "That's insane." "My husband saw riders that night," another voice called. "Said they moved wrong for Apaches. Said they seemed to know exactly where to hit. I thought he was imagining things, but..." The man's voice cracked. "You son of a bitch! You killed him!" The mood in the room shifted like a breaking wave. Suddenly, Hale was the one surrounded by hostile faces, and his men were backing away, disassociating themselves from whatever was about to happen. Hale saw it too. His eyes darted toward the door, calculating escape. "Don't," Mary Chen said, raising her shotgun. "You move, I drop you, and unlike Ronan, I won't aim for your hat." Hale went very still. For a long moment, the only sound was the creak of the warehouse walls in the night wind. Then Clara spoke, her voice cutting through the tension. "We can end this, right now. No more killing, no more raids. But it requires everyone here to choose. Do you want justice or just revenge?" "What are you proposing?" someone asked. Clara looked at Ronan, then at the crowd. "Hale faces trial, real trial, with the army or territorial marshal. We present the evidence, let the law decide. And in the meantime, we declare a truce. Settlers and Apache. No more attacks from either side while this gets sorted out." "The Apaches won't agree to that," a man scoffed. "They will if I ask them to," Ronan said. "I speak for my band. We're tired of this war. If you're willing to stop treating us like animals, we're willing to talk peace." Hale laughed, a bitter, ugly sound. "Peace? With savages? You're all fools. This territory will never—" "Shut up," Pike said. He was staring at the fake arrows in Ronan's hand, his face gray. "Just shut up, Victor." Hale turned to him. "You're with me. You've always been—" "I was with you when I thought we were defending our homes, not when you were burning them yourself." Pike's voice was hollow. "How many people died? How many families?" Hale opened his mouth, closed it. For the first time since Clara had met him, he looked uncertain. The older woman stepped forward. "I say we take him. Lock him up until the marshal can get here. Let the law handle it." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Not everyone. Some still looked suspicious of Ronan, still looked ready to fight. But enough. A majority. "Mary?" Clara asked quietly. Mary Chen nodded. "I've got a storage cellar with a good lock. We can keep him there." "This is insane," Hale said, but the fire had gone out of his voice. He was looking at his men, seeing the betrayal in their faces. "You're all making a mistake. The Apaches will honor the truce," Ronan said, "as long as you honor it. Which means no more raids, no more burnings. You live your lives, we live ours, and we try to find a way to share this land without killing each other." "And if they break the truce," someone challenged, "then we're right back where we started, but at least we tried." Ronan lowered his rifle slightly. "Peace isn't weakness, it's just harder than war." The crowd was quiet, processing. Clara could see the decision forming in the silence, tentative, fragile, but real. All right, the older woman said, we try it your way, but Hale stays locked up, and any Apache who breaks the truce gets the same treatment. Agreed, Ronan said. It wasn't unanimous. Several men left the warehouse in disgust, and Clara heard muttered threats as they went. But most stayed. Most were willing to try. Mary and 2 other men moved to take Hale. He didn't resist, but the look he gave Clara and Ronan promised retribution if he ever got free. This isn't over, he said as they led him away. You think you've won, but all you've done is delay the inevitable. The warehouse emptied slowly. People filed out in small groups, talking in low voices. Some looked hopeful. Others looked like they were planning which weapons to load first. Clara found herself standing alone with Ronan and Mary. The adrenaline was draining, leaving her shaky and exhausted. That was either brilliant or suicidal, Mary said to Ronan. Possibly both. I could say the same about her, Ronan nodded at Clara. Accusing Hale in front of 40 armed men? That took guts. Or stupidity, Clara said, echoing Mary's earlier words. Definitely both, Mary agreed. She looked between them. So what now? You 2 really think this truce will hold? For a while, Ronan said. Maybe long enough to make it real. And if it doesn't? Then we tried. He met Clara's eyes. That counts for something. Mary shook her head. You're both insane. But I suppose insane is what this territory needs. She picked up her shotgun. I'm going to make sure Hale's secure. You 2 should clear out before someone decides finishing what we started sounds appealing. She left them standing in the empty warehouse. The single lamp cast long shadows, made the space feel cavernous and strange. You shouldn't have come, Clara said quietly. You put yourself in danger. So did you. But Ronan moved closer. I heard what was happening. Heard they were calling it a trial. I couldn't let you face that alone. I wasn't alone. Mary's brave, but she's not me. There was something in his voice, possession, maybe, or protectiveness. You're under my protection, Clara. That means when you're threatened, I come, no matter the risk. Clara's heart was doing complicated things in her chest. Why? Why what? Why me? You said you knew my father, but that's not enough to risk war over. So why? Ronan was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was low. When I first saw you, you were measuring foundation posts in the ruins of your home. Most people would have run. You stayed. You rebuilt. And when Hale tried to intimidate you, you looked him in the eye and refused to break. He paused. That's rare, courage like that. It reminded me that not all settlers are the same, that maybe there's hope for something better. That's still not a reason to risk your life. No. Ronan stepped closer still, close enough that Clara could feel the heat radiating from him. But somewhere between watching you build that chicken coop and listening to you defend my people in front of a hostile crowd, it became personal. You're not just a symbol anymore, Clara. He didn't finish. Didn't need to. Clara saw it in his eyes, the same thing she'd been trying not to name in herself. This wasn't just about alliance or protection anymore. This was something far more dangerous. We can't, Clara whispered. I know. It would destroy everything we're trying to build. The truce, the peace. I know. So we agree. This doesn't happen. Yes, but Ronan didn't move away. Neither did Clara. They stood there in the lamplight, close enough to touch, but not touching, balanced on the knife edge between what they should do and what they wanted to do. Finally, Ronan stepped back. You should go home. Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be complicated. Clara nodded, not trusting her voice. She walked past him toward the door, felt his eyes following her. At the threshold, she stopped. Thank you, she said without turning around. For coming, for the evidence, for everything. Thank you for being worth it. Clara walked out into the night before she could do something stupid like turn around. The air was cool, stars impossibly bright, and her hands were shaking so hard she had to clench them into fists. She made it halfway back to her ranch before she had to stop and just breathe, leaning against a boulder and trying to get her heart rate under control. This was a disaster. falling for Ronan Redhawk, an Apache war leader, the man blamed for her father's death, the person most likely to get her killed, was the worst possible thing she could do. It violated every rule of survival she'd learned. It endangered the fragile peace they'd just negotiated. And it was happening anyway. The next days were strange. The truce held, mostly because both sides were too exhausted and shocked to do anything else. Hale remained locked in Mary's cellar, and word was sent to the nearest army post for a marshal or someone with actual legal authority. That would take weeks, maybe months. In the meantime, Salvation Creek existed in an uneasy limbo. Clara threw herself into work. The chicken coop was finished. She started on a proper house foundation, mixing adobe and stones into something that might actually survive a storm. Her hands blistered, then calloused. Her back ached constantly. She welcomed the pain. It kept her mind occupied. Ronan didn't come to the ranch. Clara told herself she was relieved. It was safer this way, smarter. The townspeople were watching her closely, looking for any excuse to claim she'd broken the truce. A visit from Ronan would spark exactly that. But she missed him, which was stupid and dangerous and true. On the fourth day, Nalin appeared instead. Clara was hauling water from the well when she looked up and saw Ronan's sister standing at the property line. Nalin wasn't alone. 3 other women were with her, all carrying baskets. Clara's hand moved toward the Winchester, then stopped. This wasn't a raid. The women weren't armed, weren't hostile. They were visiting? Clara walked toward them slowly. Nalin smiled, a real smile, not the careful politeness from their first meeting. "We bring gifts," Nalin said in careful English, "for the woman who saved our children." The baskets were full: dried meat, vegetables, woven blankets, even a small clay pot with seeds. Clara stared at the offerings, her throat tight. "I can't accept all this." "You can. You will." Nalin's tone brooked no argument. "My brother says you build alone. That's wrong. Women should help women." "I don't want to cause trouble. The truce is fragile. The truce is what we make it." Nalin set down her basket, looked at the half-built house foundation. "You need help. We help. That's how peace works." The other women were already moving, examining Clara's work with the critical eyes of experienced builders. One of them said something in Apache, and Nalin laughed. "She says your mixing is wrong. Too much straw, not enough sand. She'll show you the right way." And just like that, Clara had help. The women worked with efficient ease, correcting her mistakes and showing her techniques she'd never have figured out alone. They didn't speak much English, but they communicated through gestures and demonstration. By the end of the day, Clara had learned more about adobe construction than in all her previous weeks of struggle. When they prepared to leave, Nalin pulled Clara aside. "My brother asks about you," she said quietly. "Every day. Is she well? Does she need anything?" He tries to sound casual. He's very bad at it. Clara's face heated. "I ask about him too." "I know. Mary tells me." Nalin's expression was knowing. "This thing between you, it's dangerous." "I know. But also maybe necessary. For the peace to be real, there must be bridges, connections." Nalin paused. "Just be careful. There are people on both sides who will see any affection as betrayal." It's not. Nalin's smile was gentle. "Clara, I have eyes, and I know my brother. Whatever you're telling yourselves, it's already happened. The question is what you do about it." She left Clara standing in the dust, mind spinning. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She lay in her shelter, listening to coyotes and thinking about Ronan's hands, the way he moved, the look in his eyes in the warehouse, thinking about Nalin's words, already happened. She was still awake when she heard the horse. Clara grabbed the Winchester, peered out. A single rider approached, and even in the darkness she knew the silhouette. Ronan dismounted 20 yards out, approached on foot. He looked tired, wary, like a man who knew he was making a mistake but couldn't stop himself. "I shouldn't be here," he said. "No. People are watching. Both are people. This will cause talk." "Yes." "I'll go. I just needed to see you. Make sure you were—" Clara kissed him. She didn't plan it, didn't think it through. One second she was standing with the rifle, The next she'd closed the distance and her mouth was on his, and rational thought had left the building entirely. Ronan went rigid with surprise. Then his arms came around her and he was kissing her back, fierce and desperate. His hands were in her hair, her back was pressed against the shelter wall, and Clara forgot how to breathe. When they finally broke apart, both of them were shaking. "We can't," Ronan said, but his hands were still on her waist. "I know. It'll destroy everything. I know. Clara, I don't care." The words came out raw, honest. "I know it's stupid. I know it's dangerous, but I'm tired of pretending I don't feel this." Ronan's forehead dropped to rest against hers. "If we do this, there's no going back. You understand that? People will call you traitor. They'll say you've chosen the enemy. Let them. My people will say I'm betraying our cause, that I've been compromised." "Are they wrong?" Ronan laughed, a low, pained sound. "Probably not." He pulled back enough to meet her eyes. "I'm falling for you, against all sense, against all strategy. You terrify me." "Good. You terrify me too." They stood there in the darkness, balanced between impossible and inevitable. Finally, Ronan said, "We can't let anyone know, not yet. The truce is too fragile. So we're a secret. For now, until things stabilize." He cupped her face in his hands. "But I'm not letting you go. Whatever else happens, I'm not walking away from this." "Neither am I." Ronan kissed her again, slower this time. Thorough. Clara felt it all the way to her bones, the promise and the danger wrapped together. When he finally left, riding into the darkness with one last look back, Clara sat against the shelter wall and tried to process what she'd just done. She'd fallen for the enemy, kissed him, chosen him, in a territory balanced on the edge of war, where every action had consequences and loyalty meant survival. She'd picked the most dangerous path possible, and she'd do it again. In a heartbeat. The next week passed in a strange duality. During the day, Clara maintained careful distance. She worked her ranch, traded in town, endured suspicious looks and whispered conversations. The townsfolk were split, some grateful for the truce, others resentful. A few families had started making cautious contact with Apache bands, trading goods and information. Others armed themselves and waited for the peace to break. But at night, Ronan came. Never predictably, never for long. They met in darkness, spoke in whispers, touched like they were stealing something precious. It was dangerous and reckless, and the best thing in Clara's life. They talked about everything. Ronan told her about growing up, about his sister's husband who'd died in a cavalry raid, about the impossible balance of being a leader when your people were being pushed off their land piece by piece. Clara told him about Philadelphia, about her father's dreams and failures, about teaching piano to girls who'd never know struggle. "Do you miss it?" Ronan asked one night. They were sitting behind Clara's shelter, backs against the wall, shoulders touching. "Your old life?" Clara considered. "Sometimes. The safety. The simplicity. But that life was small, constrained. This—" She gestured at the darkness, the vast territory beyond. "This is terrifying, but it's real. I'm real here, not just decorative." "You were never just decorative. You didn't know me then. I know you now. That's enough." Clara turned to look at him. In the moonlight, his face was all plains and shadows. "What happens when the marshal comes? When Hale goes to trial?" "Depends on what they decide. If they believe our evidence, if they're willing to prosecute a white man for crimes against settlers..." Ronan shook his head. "It's not likely." "So this truce is temporary?" "Maybe. Or maybe it's the start of something. If enough people see it can work, want it to work." He trailed off. "You don't really believe that." "I want to. That counts for something." They sat in silence, and Clara thought about futures that might never exist. A world where she and Ronan could be together openly, where Apache and settler could live side by side without constant fear. It seemed impossible, but so had everything else she'd survived. "Whatever happens," Clara said, "I'm not sorry for any of this." Ronan took her hand, laced their fingers together. "Neither am I." He left before dawn, as always. Clara watched him go and wondered how long they could sustain this. The secret meetings, the careful lies, the double life. She got her answer 2 days later when Pike showed up at her ranch. He rode in at noon, alone and unarmed. Clara watched him approach, rifle ready but not raised. Pike had been Hale's right hand, but he'd also been the first to break ranks. She didn't know what to make of him. "Miss Whitmore," he called, stopping his horse at a respectful distance. "I need to talk to you. It's important." "So talk." Pike glanced around, nervous. "Not out here. Inside, please." Clara hesitated, then gestured toward her shelter. It wasn't much for privacy, but it was better than the open. She kept the rifle with her. Inside, Pike looked even more uncomfortable. His shoulder was healing badly. Clara could see the way he favored it. He took off his hat, turned it in his hands. "I owe you an apology," he said abruptly. "For everything. Following Hale, threatening you, believing his lies. I was wrong." "All right. Apology noted. That what you came to say?" "No." Pike took a breath. "There's talk in town. About you and Red Hawk. People have seen him riding this direction at night, seen him leaving near dawn, and they're putting together what it means." Clara's stomach went cold. People are always talking. This is different. There's a group, maybe 10 men, who think the truce was a mistake. They're planning to break it, use you as an excuse. Pike met her eyes. "They're going to kill you, Clara. Make it look like Apaches did it. Then use your death to restart the war." The world tilted. "When?" "Soon. Maybe tomorrow. I don't have details, but I know they're serious. Brennan overheard them planning and told me." Pike's voice was urgent. "You need to run, tonight. Take Red Hawk if you want, but go. If I run, they win. They get the war they want. If you stay, you die. And the war happens anyway." Clara's mind raced. Pike was right. Staying made her a target, but running would abandon everything she'd built, betray everyone who'd trusted the truce. There had to be another option. "Who's leading them?" she asked. Pike hesitated. "Man named Cord. Drifter. Came through about 3 months ago. Hale hired him for protection, but I think he's been planning this longer." Cord. Clara didn't recognize the name. "Where can I find him?" "You can't fight 10 men alone, Clara." "I'm not planning to fight them. I'm planning to expose them, just like we did with Hale." She looked at Pike. "Will you help me?" "Help you how?" "Get me into their meeting. Let me hear what they're planning. If we have details, dates, targets, proof of intent, we can show people this isn't about keeping the peace. It's about starting war for profit." Pike looked at her like she'd lost her mind. "That's suicide." "So is running. So is staying. At least this way I'm doing something. Red Hawk will never—" "Ronan doesn't get a vote." Clara stood. "Are you helping or not?" Pike stared at her for a long moment. Then he sighed. "You're insane. But I'm already in this deep. Might as well drown." He stood. "They meet tonight. An old line shack 5 miles east of town. I can get you close, but after that you're on your own." "That's all I need." After Pike left, Clara sat in her shelter and tried to think through what she was about to do. Infiltrate a meeting of men planning murder, gather evidence while surrounded by enemies, and somehow survive long enough to present it. It was insane, suicidal, exactly the kind of reckless choice that got people killed. She started loading weapons anyway. Ronan appeared at sunset, as if summoned by Clara's thoughts. He took one look at her face and said, "What happened?" Clara told him everything: Pike's warning, the planned attack, her intention to gather evidence. Ronan's expression went through several stages: shock, anger, and finally grim resignation. "You're not going alone." "I have to. If they see you, it confirms everything they believe, but if I'm alone, you'll be killed." "Maybe, maybe not, but it's the only play that doesn't guarantee war." Clara met his eyes. "You know I'm right. I know you're going to get yourself killed, and I can't stop you because you're as stubborn as you are brave." Ronan's jaw was tight. "I hate this." "I'm not thrilled either." "Then don't go." "We both know I have to." They stared at each other. Finally, Ronan said, "At least let me position warriors nearby. Hidden. If things go wrong, If things go wrong and Apache warriors appear, it'll start exactly the war we're trying to prevent. I don't care about the war. I care about you. The words hung between them, raw and honest. Clara felt her throat tighten. I'll be careful, she said. That's not enough. It has to be. Ronan pulled her close, held her like he could physically prevent what was coming. Clara pressed her face against his chest, listened to his heartbeat, and tried to memorize the feel of safety. Because in a few hours, she was walking into a den of men who wanted her dead. And this time, there might not be anyone to save her. Pike met her an hour after dark at a dried creek bed 2 miles from her ranch. He had a second horse, both animals chosen for their dark coloring and quiet temperament. Clara had changed into her darkest clothes, left the Winchester behind in favor of just the Derringer. Less conspicuous, easier to hide. Last chance to reconsider, Pike said as she mounted. Not happening. They rode in silence through country that looked alien in the moonlight. Every shadow seemed to hide threats. Every sound made Clara's hand twitch toward the Derringer. She tried to steady her breathing, focus on what came next instead of all the ways this could go catastrophically wrong. The line shack appeared like a wound in the landscape. A sagging structure of warped wood and rusted tin that looked abandoned until you saw the horses tethered behind it. 6 animals, maybe 7. Lamplight leaked through gaps in the walls. Pike reined up 100 yards out. That's as close as I can get you without questions. The back wall has loose boards. You can probably hear through them. But Clara, if they catch you... I know. No, I don't think you do. These men, they're not like Hale. He had ambition, greed. These are true believers. They think killing Apaches is righteous work. They'll do worse than kill you if they find out what you are to Red Hawk. Clara's jaw tightened. What I am to him doesn't define what I'm doing here. Doesn't it? Pike's voice was quiet. You're risking your life for peace. That's brave. But be honest about why. It's not just about your father's ranch anymore. It's about him. He was right, and Clara knew it. Somewhere in the chaos of the last weeks, her reasons had shifted. This wasn't just about land or justice. It was about protecting something fragile and new and worth dying for. Stay with the horses, she said, dismounting. If I'm not back in an hour, ride to Ronan's camp. Tell him what happened. And then what? Then he decides whether revenge is worth the war it'll start. Clara moved toward the shack before Pike could respond. The ground was treacherous, rocks and dead brush that crackled underfoot. She picked her way carefully, hyper-aware of every sound. The Derringer was a small weight in her pocket, 2 shots against however many men were inside. Not good odds. But this wasn't about fighting. The back wall was exactly as Pike described. Several boards had rotted away at the bottom, leaving gaps wide enough to see and hear through. Clara crouched low, pressing herself against the weathered wood. Inside, men sat around a makeshift table. She counted 8, maybe 9. Rough-looking, heavily armed. One of them, lean and cold-eyed with a scar running from temple to jaw, seemed to be in charge. Cord, probably. Don't see why we're waiting, someone was saying. Every day that passes, more people start thinking the truce might work. Because timing matters. Cord's voice was flat, methodical. We hit her too soon. There's no build-up. People might suspect. But we wait until the marshals close, until everyone's relaxed, thinking maybe this peace is real? He smiled without humor. That's when we strike. Maximum impact. What about Red Hawk? Another man asked. He'll know it wasn't his people. Of course he will, but he'll also know that coming to her rescue will prove every suspicion the settlers have, that he and the Whitmore woman are... Cord made a crude gesture. The man's between a rock and a hard place. Either he stays quiet and loses face with his own people, or he retaliates and starts the war anyway. Clara's fingernails dug into her palms. They'd thought this through, planned for every contingency. This wasn't a crime of passion or opportunity. It was calculated murder designed to ignite maximum conflict. How do we make it look Apache? Someone asked. Cord pulled out a bundle of arrows. The same fake ones Ronan had shown at the meeting. Hale had the right idea. Wrong execution. We use these. Leave some evidence, maybe scalp her for authenticity. Clara's stomach turned over. The casual way he discussed mutilating her corpse, like it was a detail on a grocery list. Some people might not buy it, the first man said. That Chen woman, she's sharp. And Brennan's been acting strange, asking questions. Then they have accidents too, if necessary. The goal is simple: destroy the truce, drive the Apaches off their remaining land, and open up territory for settlement. We accomplish that. We're heroes. The men who saved the territory from savage contamination. And we get paid, someone added. That too. Cord leaned back. I've got buyers lined up in Denver. Soon as the Apaches are cleared out, land values triple. We buy cheap, sell high, everyone profits. So it all came back to money. Just like with Hale. Clara felt a deep weariness settle over her. Was there anyone in this territory who wasn't trying to profit from bloodshed? When exactly? One of the men pressed. 3 days. The marshals expected in 4, so we moved just before. Make it look like the Apaches got nervous about facing justice, lashed out. Cord's smile was cold. Whitmore dies, the truce breaks, and we're back to honest killing. 3 days. Clara had 3 days to figure out how to stop this. She started to ease back from the wall, moving carefully in the darkness. Her boot came down on a rock that shifted, made a small scraping sound. Inside, conversation stopped. You hear that? Someone said. Clara froze, not breathing. Her hand found the derringer. Probably a coyote, another voice said. Place is falling apart. Animals get in all the time. Check anyway. Footsteps, moving toward the back wall. Clara backed away slowly, trying not to make noise, but her heel caught on a root and she stumbled. The derringer slipped from her pocket, hit the ground with a metallic clink that sounded impossibly loud. The back door crashed open. A man stood silhouetted against lamplight, rifle raised. Who's there? Clara ran. She heard shouting behind her, multiple voices. Someone fired. The shot went wide, kicked up dirt 5 feet to her left. She zigzagged, making herself a harder target, but the darkness that had hidden her now worked against her. She couldn't see obstacles, nearly fell twice. More shots. One passed close enough she felt the air displacement. Then she heard horses. They were mounting up, coming after her. Clara's lungs burned. She'd never make it back to Pike, couldn't lead them to him anyway. She veered north instead, toward rougher country where horses would struggle. If she could reach the Arroyo system, something hit her from the side, full body tackle that drove her into the ground. Air exploded from her lungs. She tasted blood and dirt. Hands grabbed her, hauled her upright. Clara fought, got an elbow into someone's ribs, heard a grunt of pain. Then a fist connected with her temple and the world tilted sideways. When her vision cleared, she was surrounded. 4 men on foot, more on horseback, and Cord standing directly in front of her, lamplight from the shack casting his face in harsh relief. Well, he said, this is unexpected. Clara Whitmore, the woman of the hour. Were you lost or just incredibly stupid? Clara spat blood. Go to hell. Cord backhanded her. The blow snapped her head around, filled her mouth with copper. She stayed on her feet through sheer stubbornness. Who knows you're here? Cord demanded. Clara said nothing. Doesn't matter. You heard things you shouldn't have. That's unfortunate. For you. Cord drew his knife, a wicked thing with a serrated edge. We were going to wait 3 days, but you've given us a gift, a chance to make this look even more authentic. People know where I am, Clara said, trying to keep her voice steady. They'll come looking. The Apache? Cord's smile was vicious. Let them come. We'll be ready. In fact, having witnesses to your tragic death might work even better. Really sell the narrative. He was insane. They all were. Clara could see it in their faces, the eagerness for violence, the absolute certainty that what they were doing was righteous. These weren't men you could reason with or negotiate with. They were already writing the story, and she was just a prop in it. Cord moved closer, knife catching lamplight. Any last words? Something for us to tell your Apache lover before we kill him, too? Clara's mind raced. She had no weapons, no backup, no way out. In seconds, Cord would start cutting, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Then the night exploded. Arrows came from 3 directions at once. One of the men holding Clara took a shaft through the shoulder and dropped, screaming. Another caught an arrow in the thigh. Cord spun, knife raised, looking for targets that weren't there. Apaches, someone shouted. We're under attack. But it wasn't an attack. Not exactly. The arrows were precise, targeted, wounding, not killing, designed to create chaos and fear. In the confusion, Clara tore free from the remaining men and ran, not toward the horses, they were shooting wildly in that direction, but perpendicular into the deepest darkness she could find. She made it maybe 30 yards before strong hands caught her, pulled her down behind a boulder. Clara swung wildly, then smelled leather and smoke and realized, "Ronan, quiet." His voice was barely a whisper. "Stay low." Behind them, the night was chaos. Men shooting at shadows, horses screaming and pulling free from their tethers. Ronan had maybe 6 warriors with him, all using the darkness and terrain to seem like many more. The effect was devastating. Cord's men were panicking, abandoning formation, shooting at anything that moved. "I told you not to come," Clara whispered, "and I ignored you." Ronan's jaw was tight. "We're leaving. Now." He pulled her to her feet, guided her through the darkness with the confidence of someone who could navigate by starlight. They moved fast but quiet, Ronan's hand steady on her arm. Behind them, the shooting was starting to die down as Cord's men realized they were hitting nothing. They reached the horses, not Pike's location, but another spot where Ronan had left his own mount. He lifted Clara into the saddle like she weighed nothing, swung up behind her. "What about your warriors?" Clara asked. "They know how to disappear." Ronan kicked the horse into motion, heading north toward the mountains. They rode hard for 20 minutes before Ronan finally slowed. They were in the Arroyo country now, winding through passages that would be invisible by day and were nearly impossible to follow at night. Clara's adrenaline was crashing, leaving her shaky and cold despite the warmth of Ronan pressed against her back. "You're hurt," Ronan said, his voice tight. Clara touched her face, felt the swelling where Cord had hit her. "It's nothing." "It's not nothing." Ronan pulled the horse to a stop, dismounted, helped Clara down. His hands were gentle as he examined her face in the moonlight, but his expression was murderous. "I should have killed him." "No, that would have started a war. I know." "I know." Ronan's hands were shaking. "But when I saw him with that knife, when I realized what was about to happen, I didn't care about the war. I only cared about you." Clara caught his hands in hers. "I'm okay. I'm alive, thanks to you." "You shouldn't have been there at all. You should have—" Ronan stopped, took a breath. "I can't keep doing this. Watching you walk into danger, knowing I might lose you, it's destroying me." "Then what do you want to do?" "I want to take you somewhere safe, somewhere they can't reach you. I want to stop pretending this is sustainable." Ronan's eyes were fierce in the darkness. "I want to claim you publicly, consequences be damned. That would end the truce." "The truce is already dying. You heard what Cord said. 3 days? They would have killed you anyway. We can't stop them by hiding. We can only stop them by standing together, openly, and forcing people to choose what they value more, their prejudices or their peace." Clara's heart was hammering. "You're talking about making us public, about telling both our peoples." "Yes." "Ronan, they'll call me traitor. They'll call you compromised. Some will try to kill us both." "I know." Ronan cupped her face in his hands. "But some might see what we're trying to build, might choose to help instead of hinder. And even if they don't, at least we'll face it together instead of in secret." It was insane, reckless, everything Clara had been trying to avoid. "All right," she said. Ronan blinked. "All right?" "You're right. Hiding isn't working. Cord and his men are going to keep planning violence whether we're careful or not. But if we stand together, if we show people there's another way—" Clara took a breath. "It might not work. It'll probably get us killed, but it's better than waiting for them to pick us off one by one." Ronan pulled her into a kiss that was fierce and desperate and full of promise. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. "We do this tomorrow," Ronan said. "No more secrets. We face the territory together." "Together," Clara agreed. They rode through the night to Ronan's camp, arriving just before dawn. The camp was already stirring, warriors preparing for the day, women tending fires, children beginning to wake. Nalin saw them first, her eyes going wide as she took in Clara's battered face and Ronan's grim expression. She said something in Apache, rapid and concerned. Ronan answered, equally quick. Nalin's eyebrows rose. "You're sure?" she asked Ronan in English. "Yes. This will change everything." "I know." Nalin looked at Clara. "You understand what you're agreeing to? The danger?" "I understand." And you'll do it anyway? Yes. Nalin studied her for a long moment. Then she smiled, a real smile, warm and approving. Good. It's about time someone forced this territory to choose what it wants to be. She turned to Ronan. I'll gather the elders. They need to hear this from you first. The meeting that followed was tense. Ronan explained everything. Clara's mission to the line shack, what she'd learned, what they were proposing. The elders listened with grave faces, occasionally asking questions in Apache that Ronan answered carefully. Finally, the oldest man, white-haired and weathered like ancient wood, spoke. Ronan translated. He says this is either very brave or very foolish, possibly both. But he respects that you're not asking us to fight your battle. You're asking to fight together. What does he think we should do? Clara asked. More discussion in Apache. Then Ronan said, he thinks we should prepare for war, because even if peace is possible, there will be those who choose violence. We need to be ready. But he's not saying no? He's saying the choice is ours, but we make it with eyes open, knowing the cost. Clara looked at Ronan. Then we do it. They spent the rest of the day preparing. Word spread through the camp, reactions ranging from supportive to hostile. Some of the younger warriors looked at Clara like she was a trick, a trap designed to weaken their leader. Others seemed cautiously hopeful. The women were more practical. Nalin organized a group to help Clara clean up and change clothes, treating her battered face with poultices that stung but helped the swelling. You'll need to look strong, Nalin said as she worked. Not defeated. The settlers will be looking for any sign of weakness. I feel pretty defeated right now. Then you lie. That's what women do. We carry the weight and make it look effortless. Nalin's smile was wry. My brother chose well. You have spine. He didn't choose me. We chose each other. Even better. By late afternoon, they were ready. The plan was simple. Ride into Salvation Creek together, call another town meeting, and present everything they knew about Cord's plot. Force people to choose between supporting murderers or trying for actual peace. It was a terrible plan, but Clara couldn't think of a better one. Ronan gathered 20 warriors, enough to make a statement without seeming like an invasion. Clara rode beside him, trying not to think about all the ways this could go catastrophically wrong. As they descended from the canyon country toward the settlement, she could see people stopping to stare, pointing, running to spread word. By the time they reached the edge of town, a crowd had gathered. Maybe 50 people, all armed, all looking hostile. Clara saw Mary Chen near the front, shotgun in hand, her expression unreadable. Ronan reined up 50 yards from the crowd. The warriors spread out behind him, a show of force that was also a statement. We come for talking, but we're prepared for fighting. We need to speak, Ronan called out. All of you, about what's coming and what we can still prevent. Why should we listen to you? Someone shouted. You're the enemy. Am I? I haven't raided your homes, haven't killed your families. Those crimes were committed by men like Victor Hale and the ones who follow him. Ronan gestured to Clara. This woman discovered a plot. Men planning to murder her and blame my people, restarting the war for profit. We're here to expose them before more innocents die. She's one of you now, a woman screamed. Apache whore, sleeping with the enemy. Clara felt the words like punches, but she forced herself to sit straight in the saddle. I'm one of you, she called back. Born in Philadelphia, raised American, came here to honor my father's dream. The only difference between me and you is I'm willing to see past hate long enough to find truth. Truth? The man who spoke was middle-aged, weathered, holding a rifle. Truth is you've betrayed your own kind. Truth is you're choosing them over us. I'm choosing peace over profit, Clara shot back. There are men in this town planning murder, planning to kill me and make it look like an Apache raid. Their names are Cord and... Lies. Cord himself pushed through the crowd, his scarred face twisted with rage. She's trying to turn you against your own people. Can't you see it? She's been compromised, twisted by that savage into betraying everything we stand for. The crowd murmured, uncertain. Clara could feel the moment slipping away. Then Mary Chen stepped forward. I believe her. Everyone turned. Mary stood with her shotgun across her arms, her expression hard as stone. Clara Whitmore has done nothing but work honest land and try to survive. The men threatening her are the same ones who profited from every raid, every attack. If she says there's a plot, I believe her." "You would," someone sneered. "You've always sided with outsiders." "I side with facts." Mary's voice cut like a blade. "And the fact is, every raid that's happened in the last 6 months has conveniently opened up land that got bought cheap and sold high. Every single one. You think that's coincidence?" The crowd shifted, uncertain. Clara saw doubt spreading, cracks forming in Cord's narrative. "She's right," a new voice said. Brennan pushed forward, looking sick but determined. "I've been tracking it. The pattern's clear. Someone's been orchestrating these attacks for profit, and it ain't the Apaches. Traitors," Cord spat. "All of you. Can't you see what's happening? They're infecting our people, turning us soft. The only infection here is greed." Pike appeared from the crowd's edge, his wounded shoulder still bandaged. "I followed Clara last night. Heard your whole plan, Cord. 3 days, you said. Kill her, blame the Apaches, restart the war. I heard every word." Cord's face went purple. "You're lying. You're all—" "I'm not." Pike pulled out a small notebook. "I wrote it down. Everything. Who was there, what was said, what you're planning, and I'm willing to testify to the marshal when he arrives." The crowd erupted. Some people were shouting support for Clara and Ronan, others screaming that it was all lies. Cord was trying to rally his supporters, but more people were stepping away from him, distancing themselves. Then a new sound cut through the chaos. Hoofbeats. Multiple riders, approaching fast from the east. The crowd parted as a cavalry unit rode in, maybe 30 soldiers led by an officer with captain's bars. Clara's heart sank. This was it. Either salvation or destruction, depending on which way the captain jumped. The officer surveyed the scene with sharp eyes. "What's going on here?" Everyone started talking at once. The captain held up a hand for silence, then pointed at Mary. "You. Mrs. Chen, right? You're known for being level-headed. Explain." Mary did, concisely and clearly. She laid out the fake raids, Hale's arrest, the truce, and now Cord's plot. The captain listened without interrupting, his face giving nothing away. When Mary finished, he turned to Cord. "Is this true?" "Of course not. I'm asking yes or no. Did you plan to kill this woman and blame it on Apaches?" Cord's hand moved toward his gun, fast, but not fast enough. The captain's sidearm was out before Cord cleared leather. "I wouldn't," the captain said quietly. Cord froze. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Cord's hand dropped, and soldiers moved in to disarm him. "You're under arrest," the captain said. "You and anyone else involved in this plot. We'll sort out who did what when we get to the fort." He looked at his men. "Round them up." What followed was chaotic. Cord's supporters tried to run or fight, and the soldiers moved with efficient brutality to contain them. Clara watched it happen from horseback, still not quite believing it was real. The captain approached Ronan and Clara, his expression carefully neutral. "You're Ronan Redhawk." "I am." "I'm Captain Harris. I've been tracking your movements for 2 years. Harris paused. "Never thought I'd be thanking you for preventing a massacre, but here we are." "That was good work, exposing this." "The credit belongs to her," Ronan said, nodding to Clara. Harris looked at Clara, taking in her battered face and determined expression. "Miss Whitmore, you've caused quite a stir." "Wasn't my intention, sir." "Rarely is." Harris glanced between them, and Clara saw understanding in his eyes. "This truce you've negotiated, you think it can hold?" "If people want it to," Ronan said. "That's the question, isn't it? Wanting peace versus choosing it." Harris sighed. "I'll be honest. My orders are to pacify this territory. Usually that means forcing the Apache onto reservations by violence if necessary. But," he looked at the crowd, at the mixture of hostile and hopeful faces, "maybe there's another way. If you can maintain this truce, if you can show the territory that coexistence is possible, I'm willing to recommend we try it." "And if we fail," Clara asked, "then I'll have no choice but to follow my orders." "War, relocation, the whole bloody mess." Harris's expression was grim. "So don't fail, for everyone's sake." He rode off to supervise the arrests, leaving Clara and Ronan surrounded by a crowd that didn't know whether to cheer or riot. Mary approached, her shotgun finally lowered. "Well, that was something." "Is it over?" Clara asked. The immediate crisis? Maybe, but you two just painted targets on yourselves that'll never come off. Mary looked at Ronan. You know that, right? Some people will never accept this. We know, Ronan said. And you're doing it anyway? Clara reached over, took Ronan's hand. The gesture was public, deliberate, impossible to misinterpret. Yes. The crowd's reaction was mixed. Gasps, curses, a few cheers. But Clara didn't care. She was done hiding. Ronan squeezed her hand back, his expression fierce and proud. We're doing it anyway. The silence that followed Clara and Ronan's public declaration lasted maybe 3 seconds. Then someone threw a rock. It sailed past Clara's head close enough that she felt the displacement of air. The crowd erupted, some surging forward with anger, others pulling back in shock. Ronan's warriors closed ranks immediately, weapons ready, but not raised. The cavalry soldiers moved to form a barrier, Captain Harris barking orders. Stand down! Harris's voice cut through the chaos. All of you stand down now, or you'll be joining cord in chains. The crowd hesitated, caught between rage and fear of military consequences. In that pause, Clara dismounted. Ronan reached for her, but she shook her head and walked forward until she stood between the hostile crowd and the Apache warriors. You want to kill me? Clara called out. Her voice was hoarse but steady. Fine. Here I am. No weapons, no protection. But before you do, you should know what you're choosing. You're choosing to side with men like Cord and Hale. Men who murdered your neighbors for profit. Men who would have kept bleeding this territory dry while you blamed the wrong people. You betrayed your own kind, a man shouted. My kind? Clara's laugh was bitter. Who decides that? You? Because I'm white, I'm supposed to hate anyone who isn't? I'm supposed to ignore evidence and justice because it's easier to kill than to think? She shook her head. My father came here believing people could build something better. He died for that belief. And I'll be damned if I let his murder be used to justify more killing. She's right. The voice belonged to the older woman from the warehouse meeting. She stepped forward, her face lined with grief. I lost my husband to a raid. Spent weeks wanting revenge, wanting blood. But it wasn't Apaches who killed him. It was Hale's men dressed up and playing war. And I almost let them get away with it because hate was easier than truth. Another person stepped forward, then another. Not everyone, maybe a third of the crowd. But enough. Enough to show that the territory was split, that some people were willing to try. Captain Harris surveyed the scene with calculating eyes. Here's what's going to happen. Anyone who can't accept this truce, you're free to leave. Pack up, head east or west, find somewhere else to settle. No judgment. But if you stay, you accept the terms. No raids from either side, no violence, and genuine attempt at coexistence. Break it, and you answer to me. Clear? The crowd murmured, uncertain. A few men turned and walked away immediately, disgust written on their faces. Others looked torn. What about them? Someone asked, pointing at Ronan and his warriors. They just get to stay? Keep their land. It was their land first, Harris said flatly. The treaty says they're supposed to have autonomy in their traditional territories. We've been ignoring that for convenience. I'm proposing we stop ignoring it and start honoring our own agreements. They stay, you stay, and we figure out how to share. That's not what I signed up for when I came here. Then leave. Harris's voice was iron. But if you stay, you follow the rules. And the first rule is this woman. He nodded at Clara. And this man, nodding at Ronan, are under my protection. Anyone touches them answers to the United States Army. Are we clear? Slowly, reluctantly, the crowd dispersed. Some went muttering threats. Others looked thoughtful, considering. Mary Chen approached Clara with an expression that mixed pride and exasperation. You've got a talent for making life complicated, Mary said. Clara's legs were shaking with delayed adrenaline. It's a gift. Well, let's see if it gets you killed or celebrated. Right now it could go either way. Mary glanced at Ronan, who stood watching with careful eyes. You know what you've started? Yes, Clara and Ronan said simultaneously. Mary shook her head. Then you're either visionaries or fools. Time will tell which. Captain Harris gestured for Ronan and Clara to follow him away from the crowd. They walked to the edge of town, where his soldiers were setting up a temporary command post. I'm going to be honest, Harris said once they were alone. What you're attempting is unprecedented, and it's going to be messy as hell. The territory office will fight it. Plenty of settlers will resist. Some of your own people, he looked at Ronan, will see this as surrender. It's not surrender, Ronan said. It's survival. Call it what you want. The question is whether you can make it work. Harris pulled out a map, spread it on a makeshift table. This is the territory. Red marks are Apache traditional lands. Blue are settler claims. See how they overlap? The map was a mess of conflicting colors. In some places, the red and blue were completely overlaid. What are you proposing? Clara asked. Neutral zones. Shared spaces where both groups can trade, meet, resolve disputes without violence. Your ranch, he pointed at a spot, could be one of them. It's positioned between major Apache camps and settler homesteads, perfect middle ground. Clara looked at Ronan. What do you think? I think it means your home becomes a target from both sides. Ronan's jaw was tight. But I also think it might be the only way to force people to actually talk to each other. Then we do it. Harris nodded. I'll need you both to help negotiate specifics with your respective communities. It won't be easy. There will be people who see any compromise as betrayal, but if we can establish even one successful neutral zone, prove the concept works. He trailed off, looking almost hopeful. The next weeks were brutal. Clara and Ronan became mediators, translators, and targets all at once. They held meetings at Clara's ranch, now designated as official neutral ground, where settlers and Apache could air grievances without weapons. The first few sessions nearly devolved into violence. People shouted accusations, demanded justice for past wrongs, refused to acknowledge any perspective but their own. But slowly, painfully, progress happened. A settler woman whose husband had been killed in a raid met the Apache warrior responsible. Instead of violence, there was conversation, halting, angry but real. The warrior explained he'd been defending his family from what he thought was an attack. The woman explained her husband had been hunting, not raiding. Both realized they'd been manipulated by men like Hale who wanted conflict. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was understanding, and that was something. Trade started happening. Apache women brought beautifully woven baskets, herbs with medicinal properties, knowledge of the land that settlers desperately needed. Settlers offered tools, manufactured goods, access to markets in the east. The exchanges were cautious, hedged with suspicion, but they happened. Clara's ranch became something unexpected, a meeting point, a marketplace, a place where two cultures tried to figure out how to coexist. Nalin helped Clara expand the shelter into an actual house, teaching her Apache building techniques that were better suited to the climate than anything Clara had known. Settler women, seeing the results, started asking to learn too. Ronan spent half his time negotiating with his own people. Some warriors saw the truce as weakness, a betrayal of those who died fighting settler expansion. Ronan argued that more fighting would only lead to extermination, that this was the only path to preserving their way of life. The debates were fierce, sometimes violent. Twice, young warriors challenged his leadership. Both times, Ronan won, but barely. Through it all, Clara and Ronan's relationship became public in ways both beautiful and brutal. Some people saw them as symbols of hope. Others saw them as race traitors, dangers to be eliminated. There were 3 assassination attempts in the first month alone. The first came from a settler sympathizer who tried to shoot Ronan during a trade meeting. Clara saw the rifle rising and threw herself between them. The bullet grazed her shoulder instead of punching through Ronan's chest. She woke up in Nalin's care, Ronan sitting vigil beside her with eyes that looked haunted. "You almost died for me," he said quietly. "And I'd do it again." Clara's shoulder throbbed, but the wound was clean. "This is what we signed up for. I didn't sign up to watch you bleed. Neither did I. Doesn't mean I'm stopping." The second attempt was an Apache warrior who thought Ronan had been compromised, that he'd forgotten their people's suffering. The warrior challenged Ronan to single combat. It was brutal, fists and knives and raw determination. Ronan won, but he made sure the warrior lived. After, he helped the man up, explained again why this path was necessary. The warrior didn't agree, but he left without further challenge. The third attempt targeted both of them. A bomb planted at Clara's ranch timed to explode during a peace meeting. Pike discovered it while doing security checks, dismantled it with shaking hands. The bomber was never identified, but the message was clear. Some people would rather die than compromise. Captain Harris increased patrols after that, but he couldn't be everywhere. Clara and Ronan started sleeping in shifts, weapons always within reach. Trust became a luxury they couldn't afford. 4 months into the truce, the territorial marshal finally arrived. Marshal Webb was a weathered man in his 50s who'd seen enough frontier justice to be deeply cynical about all of it. He took statements about Hale and Cord's operations, examined the evidence, interviewed witnesses. The trial was held in a makeshift courthouse, really just the same warehouse where everything had started. The whole territory seemed to attend. Settlers and Apache mixed in the crowd, still segregated but present. Hale testified first, arrogant and defiant. He denied everything, claimed the evidence was planted, accused Clara of being an Apache sympathizer who'd orchestrated the whole thing to steal settler land. His performance was passionate, convincing to anyone who wanted to believe. Then Pike testified. Then Brennan. Then a dozen other witnesses who'd seen things, heard things, connected dots. The evidence piled up. Financial records showing land purchases, testimonies about fake Apache raids, physical proof of the manufactured weapons. Clara took the stand last. Marshal Webb asked her to explain how she'd first gotten involved, what she'd witnessed, what she'd discovered at the line shack. She told it plainly, without embellishment, letting the facts speak for themselves. During cross-examination, Hale's attorney tried to paint her as an unreliable witness, compromised by her relationship with Ronan. Isn't it true you're romantically involved with an Apache war leader? Yes. And doesn't that bias your testimony? Clara looked at the packed courthouse. My relationship with Ronan started because we were both trying to prevent more bloodshed. But my testimony isn't about him. It's about what I witnessed, men planning to murder me and restart a war for profit. Those are facts. My personal feelings don't change them. But they do change your loyalties, don't they? You're no longer loyal to your own people. My loyalty, Clara interrupted, is to the truth, to justice. If that makes me disloyal to racism and greed, I'll accept that label. The courtroom erupted. Marshal Webb gavelled for silence. The verdict came 2 days later. Guilty on all counts: conspiracy, murder, fraud, incitement to violence. Hale was sentenced to hang. Cord and his co-conspirators got similar sentences. A few received prison terms for lesser involvement. As Hale was led away in chains, he looked at Clara with pure hatred. This isn't over. You think you've won, but all you've done is delay the inevitable. This territory will run red with blood, and it'll be on your conscience. Clara met his stare. The only blood on anyone's conscience is yours. After the trial, something shifted in Salvation Creek. Not everyone accepted the verdict. Some muttered that Hale had been railroaded, that the whole thing was rigged. But enough people saw justice done, saw that the system could work even in the frontier chaos. Trade between Apache and settlers increased. More neutral zones were established. Captain Harris negotiated a formal treaty that recognized Apache territorial rights while allowing for limited settler expansion in agreed-upon areas. It wasn't perfect. There were disputes, violations, moments where the whole thing nearly collapsed, but it held. 6 months after Cord's arrest, Clara woke to find Ronan standing in the doorway of their home. No longer a shelter, but an actual house, built with both Apache and settler techniques, a physical manifestation of the merger they represented. "What's wrong?" she asked, immediately alert. "Nothing. For once, nothing's wrong." Ronan smiled, and it was startling how unfamiliar the expression looked on his warrior's face. "I was just thinking about the first time I saw you, standing in the ruins, measuring posts, refusing to quit." Clara stretched, wincing at the ache in her shoulder that never fully went away. That was a lifetime ago. 5 months. Like I said, lifetime. Ronan sat on the edge of the bed. "Nalin asked me today when we're getting married." Clara's breath caught. They'd been living together for weeks. Everyone knew it, but the word marriage carried weight, implications. "What did you tell her?" "That I hadn't asked you yet." Ronan took her hand. "Clara Whitmore, will you marry me? Not for politics or symbolism, but because I can't imagine facing another day in this territory without you beside me." Clara's throat was tight. "You know what this means. A formal marriage recognized by both our peoples. It'll make us even bigger targets." "Let them try." Ronan's grip was warm, steady. "I've faced down cavalry charges and lynch mobs. I think I can handle a wedding." "Yes," Clara said. "Yes, I'll marry you." The wedding was held at Clara's ranch on a bright autumn morning that threatened rain but stayed clear. It was unlike any ceremony either culture had ever seen. Apache rituals mixed with settler traditions, presided over by both Nalin and a circuit preacher who'd agreed to participate after considerable persuasion from Captain Harris. Mary Chen provided food. Pike and Brennan, now accepted as part of the community that valued truth over tribal loyalty, helped set up. Apache women created elaborate decorations. Settler women contributed what they could. Not everyone attended. Some settlers stayed away in protest. Some Apache warriors thought Ronan was dishonoring his heritage. But more people came than Clara had dared hope. Maybe 200 in total, creating a crowd that was half celebration, half political statement. Ronan wore traditional Apache clothing, but with a settler vest Clara had made him. Clara wore a simple dress, but with Apache beadwork woven through her hair. They were both, neither, something new. When they exchanged vows, speaking in English and Apache, promising to honor each other and the peace they represented, Clara felt the weight of every eye on them. Some watched with hope, others with barely contained rage. But they all watched. The ceremony ended with Ronan and Clara standing together, hands joined, facing a territory that would spend years deciding whether to embrace or destroy what they represented. Captain Harris gave a short speech about the future, about the possibility of genuine coexistence. Then the celebration began. Clara danced with Ronan, then with Pike, then with Apache warriors who taught her steps she'd never known. Ronan danced with Nalin, with Mary Chen, with settlers who were cautiously trying to bridge the gap. The music was a chaotic blend of fiddles and drums, and it shouldn't have worked, but somehow did. As the sun set, painting the sky orange and purple, Clara stood with Ronan overlooking the celebration. Their ranch, their neutral ground, was full of people from both sides talking, laughing, arguing, but not fighting. It was messy and imperfect and fragile. "Think it'll last?" Clara asked. Ronan considered. "The party? Maybe another hour. The peace?" He shrugged. "Some of it. There will always be people who choose hate, but there are also people who choose this." He gestured at the mixed crowd. "That's more than we had 6 months ago." "Is it enough?" "It has to be, because the alternative is everyone dies. We've shown them there's another path. Whether they take it is their choice." Clara leaned against him, feeling the solid warmth of his presence. "Your sister told me that bridges require connections, that we're the connection between two worlds. Heavy responsibility. Terrifying responsibility. So we do it anyway." Clara smiled. "We do it anyway." The months that followed were a study in gradual, painful progress. The territorial government officially recognized the neutral zones and the treaty Captain Harris had negotiated. Not everyone honored it. There were violations, attacks, moments where the whole thing threatened to collapse. But there were also successes. An Apache boy and a settler girl who'd been trading insults for weeks started trading stories instead, discovering they both loved the same types of adventure tales. A settler rancher whose cattle had been stolen found them returned with an apology from the Apache hunter who'd taken them, along with deer meat as restitution. Small moments, but they accumulated. Clara became something unexpected. A mediator, a teacher, a symbol. People came to her with disputes, knowing she'd listened to both sides without automatic prejudice. She taught Apache women to read English. She learned to speak Apache well enough to negotiate trade terms. She helped sick children from both communities, using a combination of settler medicine and Apache healing practices that worked better together than separate. Ronan's role evolved too. He was still a warrior, still respected and feared, but now his battles were fought with words instead of weapons. He negotiated hunting rights, water access, territorial boundaries. He prevented raids before they started by addressing grievances early. Some called him soft. Others called him the only reason there was still an Apache presence in the territory at all. Together they represented something the frontier had never quite seen, a genuine attempt at equality, at sharing space without dominance. It was revolutionary. It was terrifying. It was working, barely, day by day. A year after their wedding, Clara discovered she was pregnant. The news hit like a thunderclap. This wasn't just about her and Ronan anymore. This was about bringing a child into a world still figuring out if it wanted them alive. A child who would be both Apache and white, belonging fully to neither side, symbol of everything the territory was struggling to become. Nalin was thrilled. A baby! Finally, something good in all this chaos. Mary Chen was practical. You need better security. That child will be a target from day one. Captain Harris was political. This could be exactly what the territory needs, a new generation with blood from both sides. Or it could be the excuse hardliners use to restart violence. Be careful. Ronan was quiet. When Clara finally got him alone, she found him staring at the horizon with an expression she couldn't read. Talk to me, she said. I'm terrified. The admission came out raw. Of failing you, of failing this child, of bringing them into a world that might kill them for existing. Clara took his hand, placed it on her still flat stomach. We've survived everything else. We'll survive this too. How can you be sure? I can't. But I know we don't survive by hiding or running. We survive by standing together and refusing to let hate win. Clara met his eyes. This child is going to grow up knowing both cultures, understanding both peoples. They're going to be the bridge we've been trying to build. That's a lot of pressure for someone who isn't even born yet. Then we'd better make sure the world they're born into is worth living in. The pregnancy was difficult. Clara dealt with sickness, exhaustion, and the constant low-level terror that someone would use her vulnerability to attack. Ronan became hyper-vigilant, barely sleeping, seeing threats everywhere. It took Nalin sitting them both down and essentially ordering them to relax to get them to breathe. You cannot protect against every possibility, Nalin said firmly. You can only prepare, be smart, and trust your community. And you have one now. People from both sides who will defend this child because they see what it represents. She was right. As word spread about Clara's pregnancy, something unexpected happened. Gifts started arriving. Apache women brought blessings and protective talismans. Settler women knitted blankets and baby clothes. Even people who'd been hostile to the marriage seemed to soften slightly at the idea of a child. Not everyone. There were still threats, still danger, but there was also unexpected support. The baby was born on a spring morning 7 months later. The labor was long and brutal, attended by both Nalin and a settler midwife who'd learned to work together. Ronan paced outside, forbidden from entering by tradition from both cultures, looking like he might tear down the walls. When the baby's cry finally cut through the morning air, Ronan burst inside, all tradition be damned. Clara, exhausted and sweating and more alive than she'd ever felt, held out their child. A girl, the midwife said, smiling despite herself. The baby was perfect. Dark hair, eyes that would probably end up somewhere between Ronan's dark brown and Clara's lighter hazel, skin that was a beautiful blend of both her parents. She was screaming with impressive lung power, hands clenched into tiny fists. She's angry, Ronan said, wonder in his voice. Good, Clara said. She'll need to be, in this world. They named her Sarah, after Clara's mother, with an Apache name as well, Kiona, meaning Brown Hills. Sarah Kiona, Whitmore Redhawk, a mouthful, a declaration, a hope. The baby's arrival changed something fundamental in the territory. People came to see her, both Apache and settler, and found themselves cooing over the same child, arguing about whose eyes she had, offering competing advice on everything from feeding to sleeping. It was impossible to hate a baby, and through that baby, it became harder to hate each other. Clara watched it happen with cautious optimism. She saw the old woman who'd lost her husband to a fake raid holding Sarah and smiling. Saw Apache warriors who'd been ready to go to war tickling the baby's feet. Saw Mary Chen and Nalin discussing child-rearing techniques with the easy familiarity of old friends. It wasn't perfect. There were still people who refused to visit, who muttered that the child was an abomination. But they were becoming the minority. Slowly, painfully, the culture was shifting. 2 years after Sarah's birth, the territorial government formally recognized the neutral zones as permanent fixtures. The treaty Captain Harris had negotiated became official policy. Apache lands were protected by federal law, with severe penalties for violation. In exchange, Apache bands agreed to cease hostile actions against lawful settlers and to participate in regional governance. It was far from perfect. There were still disputes, still violations, still people on both sides who wanted the old ways of clear enemies and simpler hate. But the violence decreased, the collaboration increased, and a new generation was growing up seeing the other side not as monsters, but as neighbors. Clara stood on the porch of her ranch, now a substantial house with multiple rooms, storage, and a barn that didn't leak, and watched Sarah playing in the dirt with 3 other children. 2 were settler kids, 1 was Apache. They were arguing about something in a mix of English and Apache, their voices high and unconcerned with politics or history. Ronan joined her, slipping an arm around her waist. He'd gone almost completely gray at the temples, aged by the stress of the last years. Clara knew she looked older too. Her hands were rough, her face lined by sun and struggle. But they were alive. They'd survived. "Pike asked me today if we thought it was worth it," Ronan said. "All the danger, all the near-death moments. If we do it again." "What did you say?" "I said ask me when I'm sure we're going to survive." He smiled. "But the truth?" "Yes. Every time. Because look at that." He pointed at the children. Sarah had just shared her toy with the Apache boy, who'd given her a smooth stone in return. Simple, innocent, exactly what the territory needed. "We did that," Clara said quietly. "Not alone, but we started it. We survived it. That too." They stood together in the late afternoon light, watching their daughter play in the dirt of land that had been soaked with blood, but was slowly, stubbornly becoming something better. It wasn't the future Clara had imagined when she'd stepped off that stagecoach into Salvation Creek's dust. But it was real. It was earned. And it was theirs. Years later, when people asked how the peace started, they would tell different stories. Some credited Captain Harris and the Army's intervention. Others pointed to the trials that exposed the profit-driven violence. A few mentioned the neutral zones and the trade that followed. But most told a simpler story, about a woman who refused to leave her land and a warrior who chose to protect her, about choices made in darkness that led to light, about love that crossed lines supposedly too wide to bridge. The story grew in the telling, became legend, got embellished until it was half myth. But at its core remained a truth, that peace was possible when people chose courage over comfort, when they valued justice over vengeance, when they saw each other as human instead of enemy. Clara Whitmore and Ronan Redhawk didn't save the territory alone. They were just 2 people trying to survive, finding each other in the chaos, choosing connection over division. But that choice, repeated daily, defended fiercely, maintained despite every threat, became the foundation everything else built on. The frontier remained brutal. Nature didn't care about treaties. Disease still killed. Drought still happened. But the violence that had seemed inevitable, the war that everyone expected, never fully materialized. Instead, there was something messier and more complicated: coexistence. It wasn't perfect. It never would be. But it was better than blood. And in the end, that was everything. Sarah grew up bilingual, bicultural, belonging fully to both worlds, and trapped by neither. She became a teacher like her mother, a negotiator like her father, and eventually a territorial representative who helped draft laws that protected indigenous rights while enabling settler development. She married a settler man whose parents had opposed the marriage until they met her. Her children continued the legacy their grandparents had started. Clara lived to see her grandchildren. She died at 68, surrounded by family from both sides, still arguing about politics until her last breath. Ronan followed her 3 years later, his heart finally giving out after a lifetime of carrying impossible weight. They were buried together on the ranch they'd built, under a marker that listed both their names with no designation of which culture they belonged to. Because by then, it didn't matter. The territory they'd fought for became a state eventually. The story of how it avoided the worst of the Apache Wars became part of its founding mythology. Scholars argued about what really happened, picked apart the details, debated motivations. But in the small town that had been Salvation Creek, now called Whitmore Junction, there was no debate. They knew. They'd been there. They'd seen two people choose love over hate, courage over fear, and in doing so, give everyone else permission to do the same. The land still bore scars. You could find burned foundations if you knew where to look. But you could also find Apache and settler descendants working the same fields, sharing water rights, arguing about local politics with the passion of people who've chosen to stay and build rather than flee and destroy. It wasn't the ending anyone expected when Clara stepped off that stagecoach into Hell's front parlor. But it was the ending they'd earned, day by bloody day, choice by impossible choice. And in a brutal summer turned into years of gradual peace. That was miracle enough.